My baby, please." Those three words, barely louder than a dying breath, cracked through the howling Montana storm like a lightning bolt straight into Logan Whitaker's chest. He didn't think. He didn't wait. He ran. Below the guardrail, buried in smoke and fire at the bottom of a ravine, was a young woman in a torn white dress soaked in blood, one hand pressed against her pregnant belly, staring up at him like he was the last human being left on Earth. And maybe in that moment he was. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end, because this one will stay with you. Drop a comment and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The night the Silver Ravens saved Claire Anderson began the same way most important nights begin, quietly without any warning at all. It was the third Saturday of November, and the temperature in western Montana had dropped so far below freezing that the highway looked like the surface of the moon. Gray, flat, dangerous, the kind of cold that doesn't just bite, it swallows. The kind of night where most people pull their curtains, pour something warm, and thank God they're not outside. But the Silver Ravens were always outside. That was the thing people in town never understood about the motorcycle club. They weren't out there for trouble. They weren't riding in the dark because they enjoyed the risk. They were returning from their annual charity ride, 43 hours of continuous riding across 3 states to raise money for children's burn centers. 47 bikes, over 200 men and women. Leather vests, road-worn faces, and the particular kind of tired that only comes from doing something that matters. Logan Whitaker was riding point. He always rode point on the return leg. Not because he was the chapter president, though he was, but because 30 years of riding had given him a kind of road instinct that other bikers respected without quite being able to explain. He felt the road differently. He processed it differently. While other riders were watching the white lines, Logan was watching everything else. The fog that night was the kind you could almost grab with your fist. It rolled across the highway in thick waves, swallowing headlights and blurring the edges of the world. Logan had cut his speed down to 40 miles per hour, which for a man who'd once taken a Harley through the Utah salt flats at 140 felt like crawling through wet cement. His second in command, a broad-shouldered veteran named Decker, pulled alongside him on the left. "How much further to the pass?" Decker called over the wind. 20 minutes if we're lucky," Logan called back. 30 if this fog gets any worse. You want to pull over? Wait it out." Logan considered it. He glanced in his mirror. 46 bikes stretched out behind him like a chain of fireflies in the dark, every rider trusting him to make the right call. 5 more miles, he said, and there's a rest stop. We'll reassess." Decker nodded and fell back into formation. That decision to push 5 more miles before stopping was the decision that changed everything. Because 2.5 miles later, Logan smelled it before he saw it. Burning rubber, then burning oil, then something deeper, something chemical and wrong. He slowed without signaling, which was enough. Every rider behind him instinctively matched his speed, the entire convoy compressing like an accordion. Logan reached up and clicked off his headlight for exactly 3 seconds, which was the Silver Ravens road signal for stop, I need eyes on something. He eased his bike toward the shoulder and put down his kickstand. The smell was stronger here. He swung his leg off the seat and walked to the guardrail, his boots crunching on frozen gravel, and he leaned over into the dark below. At first he saw nothing, and then the fog shifted. "Decker," Logan's voice was completely flat. "Get your flashlight. Get it now." Down in the ravine, 30, maybe 35 feet below the guardrail, there was a vehicle, an SUV from the shape of it. It had rolled and come to rest on its passenger side against the rocky wall of the slope. The front end was crumpled like a tin can. The hood was raised enough that Logan could see the engine compartment, and the engine compartment was on fire. Not smoldering, not smoking, fire. Decker appeared at his shoulder with a flashlight. The beam cut down through the fog and found the wreckage, and for a long, terrible moment, neither man said anything. "Oh my God," said a woman's voice behind them. That was Maya, the club's road captain, the only woman in their inner circle and the calmest person Logan had ever known in a crisis. Her voice was not calm right now. "How long has it been down there?" "Can't tell," Logan said, "but the fire's not big yet. If there was anybody in that vehicle, they'd be dead already," Decker said quietly. Logan stared at the wreckage. The beam of Decker's flashlight caught the angle of the undercarriage wheels still spinning slowly like the crash had happened recently. Very recently. No, Logan said, not necessarily. He was already calculating the slope. Steep but not vertical. Frozen but with enough loose rock and brush to slow a descent if you were careful. His mind did the math the same way it always did mechanically, quickly without drama. I'm going down, he said. Logan, I'm going down. He was already moving toward the guardrail, already swinging one leg over. Get on the radio, get emergency services moving. Now, all of you now. The sound of the convoy coming to life behind him was extraordinary. 200 people moving with purpose are not quiet. Engines cutting off stands going down, boots on pavement, voices calling out instructions. Within 30 seconds of Logan going over the guardrail, he had people above him shining every light source they owned down into the ravine, turning 30 feet of darkness into something closer to dim twilight. He half climbed, half slid down the slope. The heat from the burning engine was reaching him now. Not dangerous yet, but present. A warning. He could smell melting plastic and something else, something sweeter and more sickening, and he refused to identify it because if he identified it, he might stop moving, and he could not stop moving. He reached the passenger side of the overturned SUV. The glass had blown out of the rear passenger window. Logan pressed himself flat and shone his own flashlight through the opening. Hello. His voice came out steadier than he expected. Is anybody in there? Can you hear me? Silence. The sound of fire crackling. Something dripping. And then help. Logan's heart stopped. He pressed closer to the window. The flashlight swept the interior, deployed airbags, shattered glass across what was now the floor. A shredded seatbelt, a woman's shoe, a shattered phone screen. Help, my baby. I hear you. Logan's voice cracked straight down the middle, and he didn't care. I hear you. I'm right here. Can you move toward my voice? A sound, not words. Something smaller than words, a breath, a moan, something that said, I'm trying and I can't. Okay, Logan said. Okay, I'm going to come to you. Stay with me. What's your name? Silence. Talk to me. What's your name? Claire. Claire. He repeated it like a prayer. My name is Logan. I have 200 people up that hill right now, and every single one of them is working on getting you out. Do you understand me? You are not alone. You are not alone. He was already moving, already pulling himself through the window frame, ignoring the bite of broken glass against his jacket, his hands, his forearms. The inside of the vehicle smelled of blood and fuel and something floral perfume maybe, and the combination was nauseating. He found her in the darkness with his hands before his light did. Her fingers, cold trembling, grabbed his wrist. She's still breathing, Logan bellowed upward, his voice carrying through the fog and the cold in the distance like a cannon shot. She's still breathing. I need medical warranty. Above him, he heard Decker relay the call, and then something happened that Logan would describe later as the most extraordinary thing he'd witnessed in 30 years on the road. 200 bikers started moving in perfect silent coordination. No chaos, no shouting over each other, no wasted motion. People who had spent their whole lives being called dangerous, called criminal, called a threat, those people organized themselves into a rescue operation in under 2 minutes. Half of them formed a human chain down the slope to pass equipment. A quarter of them cleared space on the highway shoulder for emergency vehicles. The rest maintained the perimeter, kept their headlights aimed downward, and kept the radio lines open. Maya was already on the phone with a trauma surgeon at Glacier Valley Medical Center, not the 911 dispatcher, the actual surgeon, because Maya had 3 different medical contacts in every county in this part of Montana, because Maya had always believed in being prepared for exactly this kind of night. Inside the wreckage, Logan held Claire's hand and talked to her. He talked because silence would let her drift. He talked because he needed her conscious. He talked because 30 years ago in a hospital room in Denver, a stranger had talked to him when Logan was the one who couldn't move, and it was the sound of another human voice that had kept him from going under. Claire, stay with me. How far along are you? A pause, then 8 months. 8 months, he exhaled slowly. Boy or girl? Girl. A girl! He smiled in the dark, though she couldn't see it. What's her name going to be? I don't... Her voice faded, then came back. I don't know yet. That's okay, Logan said. You've got time. She's going to need a strong name. For a strong girl, just like her mother. He was monitoring her with his hands as much as his eyes, checking her pulse at the wrist, watching the rise and fall of her chest, cataloging what he could feel without being able to see clearly. Her pulse was weak and rapid. Her breathing was shallow. The blood on her forehead had dried enough that the bleeding had slowed, but that wasn't necessarily good news. Head injuries were unpredictable. Her belly, and here was the thing that hit him hard and didn't let go, her belly was intact. She had curled herself around it during the crash. Her arms were wrapped around it, even now, even unconscious or close to it, her body had oriented itself toward protecting the child. "Claire," he said quietly, "what happened?" "Can you tell me what happened?" Her fingers tightened on his wrist. "My husband," she whispered. "He did this." Logan went completely still. "He wanted us gone." Her voice broke on the last word. "Me and my baby. He wanted us gone." The sound of sirens finally reached them, distant still, several minutes away, and Logan closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. When he opened them, his voice was absolutely level. "Nobody," he said, "is going anywhere. You understand me? You and that little girl are going to be just fine. I promise you that." It was the kind of promise Logan Whitaker did not make lightly, and the kind he did not break. Getting Claire out of that ravine was a 37-minute operation that felt like it lasted the rest of Logan's life. The first responders arrived, 2 EMTs and a small county unit professional, incapable but visibly shaken when they saw the terrain. The fire in the engine compartment had been contained. 3 bikers with compact extinguishers had scrambled down the slope almost as fast as Logan and handled it with a precision that the lead EMT, a young woman named Patterson, would later describe in her report as extraordinary. The human chain down the slope was 12 people deep by then, alternating weight and footing so that supplies could be passed down and the stretcher could come back up. Logan stayed with Claire the entire time. He held her hand during the extrication. He talked to her through every movement, every shift of her body, every moment when the pain got bad enough that her breath caught and her hand crushed his. "I've got you," he said over and over. "I've got you." When they finally got her onto the stretcher and the chain began the careful, agonizing work of raising her up the slope, Logan climbed alongside her, one hand on the rail of the stretcher, his voice never stopping. Above them, the convoy had created something that would become a widely shared photograph the next day. 200 bikers standing shoulder to shoulder along the shoulder of the highway, their headlights all aimed inward, creating a corridor of light that stretched from the guardrail to the waiting ambulance. 200 people standing in freezing temperatures in the dark and silence, making sure one woman and one unborn child made it out of that ravine. Patterson, the EMT, loaded Claire into the back of the unit. She paused at the doors and looked at Logan. "Are you family?" she asked. Logan looked at the woman on the stretcher, who he had known for 37 minutes, who had grabbed his wrist in the dark, who had trusted him with the most frightening words he'd ever heard. "Yes," he said. Patterson held his gaze for a moment, then opened the door wider. "Then get in." The ride to Glacier Valley Medical Center took 40 minutes on those roads in that weather. Patterson worked on Claire steadily throughout her movements, efficient and calm, her voice carrying the particular neutrality of someone trained to project confidence they may not fully feel. Logan sat pressed against the wall of the unit out of the way, his hands wrapped around each other, and he thought about what Claire had said. "My husband did this. He wanted us gone." He turned those words over and over in his mind. He had been in enough situations in his life to know the difference between crash survivor shock, the kind of confusion that makes people say things that don't quite mean what they sound like, and the kind of clarity that comes from a person who has been waiting a very long time to say something true to someone who might actually listen. Claire had been clear. Her eyes had been open when she said it. Her grip on his wrist had tightened. She had not been confused. She had not been delirious. She had been certain. Patterson's radio crackled, a voice from the hospital. "What's the status on the incoming? Female, approximately late 20s, 32 to 34 weeks, gestation, blunt force trauma. To the head, possible internal injuries, vitals are." Patterson rattled off numbers in a language Logan only partially spoke, but he heard enough to understand that the situation was serious. He pulled out his phone. He texted Decker. "She says the husband did it. Intentional." Decker's response came back in 40 seconds. "On it." That was all. That was enough. Saeed. Glacier Valley Medical Center was a mid-sized regional hospital with a good trauma unit and a reputation for handling whatever came down from the mountains. The staff were ready when the ambulance pulled in Trauma Team OB, on call a neurology resident who had been pulled from his dinner. They took Claire fast. Logan stood in the waiting room in his road-worn leather vest, dried blood on his hands and his forearms from the glass cuts he hadn't noticed during the descent, and a nurse approached him with a particular expression of someone who has decided to ask a question she's not sure she should ask. "Are you her?" "I found her," Logan said. "She doesn't have anyone else here right now." The nurse, her name tag read, Simmons RN, looked at him for a long moment. Then she went and got him a cup of coffee and a set of those paper hospital forms that don't quite know what to do with a stranger who pulled someone from a burning car. "Do you know her name?" "Claire," Logan said. "She told me her last name, but—" He stopped. He thought Anderson. He hadn't asked, she hadn't said, but he had seen it, on the inside of her wrist, barely visible in the darkness of the wreckage. A medical alert bracelet. Claire R. Anderson. Blood type O positive. Penicillin allergy. "Anderson," he said. "Claire Anderson." Nurse Simmons wrote it down. And Logan saw the exact moment she recognized the name, because she stopped writing for exactly half a second and her pen went still. "Anderson," she said again carefully. "That's right," Logan said, watching her face. "I see." Simmons capped her pen. "I'll get you some fresh forms." She walked away, and Logan was certain, absolutely certain, that she had gone first to make a phone call. So he was right. Within 20 minutes, the atmosphere in the waiting room had shifted in a way that was almost imperceptible, but that Logan, who had spent 3 decades learning to read rooms, felt as clearly as a change in air pressure before a storm. 2 of the nurses who had been moving efficiently and talking to him directly now moved with slightly less eye contact. The security guard near the front desk had repositioned himself 3 feet closer to the main entrance. The administrator who came out to ask Logan about Claire's insurance information had the clipped, careful tone of someone who had been coached on what to say. Logan took all of this in and did not comment on it. He simply texted Decker again, "What do you know about the Andersons?" Decker's response this time took longer. When it came, it was 4 words, "Call me right now." Logan stepped outside. The cold hit him like a wall. The parking lot was empty except for 3 cars and a pickup truck, and the sound of the highway in the distance was faint and steady, and Logan put the phone to his ear and waited. Decker answered on the first ring. "Logan." His voice had a quality that Logan hadn't heard from Decker in a long time, something between carefully controlled anger and genuine unease. "The Andersons are not small-town money. Noah Anderson, if that's her husband, his father is Richard Anderson. Richard Anderson owns the Valley Commerce Bank, the Glacier Ridge Development projects, half the commercial real estate in the county, and he has been the primary donor to the county sheriff's election fund for the past 12 years. Logan was quiet. 3 members of the county commissioners owe him directly, Decker continued. The DA went to school with his son. The local paper ran a profile on the family foundation 2 months ago that was basically a love letter. This is not a man who is used to being challenged. And the son, Noah, married Claire Rutherford 4 years ago. She came from a good family, but not a wealthy one. Teachers, I think her parents are both educators. She had no family money of her own. A pause. But here's the thing, Logan. Tell me. Claire's maternal grandmother died 14 months ago, and she left Claire in a state worth somewhere between $3 and $6 million. Property investments, a trust. The full details are in probate records. Manny found them in about 20 minutes. Manny was their unofficial research person. Manny could find things in 20 minutes that most private investigators would charge 3 days for. So, Logan said slowly. So if Claire dies, Decker said, and if she hasn't updated her estate documents to exclude her husband, or if he's challenged those documents, then Noah Anderson stands to inherit or control a substantial amount of money, plus whatever insurance policies might be on her life, plus the fact that without Claire, he has no paternity contest, no custody battle, no complicated divorce proceedings. The cold was very present suddenly. She's 8 months pregnant, Logan said. I know. He pushed her car into a ravine when she was 8 months pregnant. Logan, Decker's voice was level. That's what she told you. We don't know. I know, Logan said. And he meant it in a way that went past evidence, past documentation, past the kind of knowing that held up in courtrooms. He had sat in that wreckage and held that woman's hand and heard her voice and felt her certainty in the grip of her fingers. She wasn't confused, Decker. She knew exactly what she was saying. A long silence. What do you want to do? Decker finally asked. Logan looked back at the entrance to Glacier Valley Medical Center. "I want to stay right here," he said, "until she wakes up, and then I want to hear the whole story. And after that, Logan said, we'll figure out what we can actually do about it." He went back inside. He sat back down in the waiting room, and he waited. At 11:47 that night, a man walked into the waiting room of Glacier Valley Medical Center who did not look like a man whose wife had just nearly died. He looked like a man who had been coached. Logan would think about this later, about the specific quality of someone performing grief rather than experiencing it. The way real grief makes people clumsy, uncertain, prone to repetition and contradiction, and the small physical disorganizations that the body produces when the mind is overwhelmed. Real grief doesn't stay in its lane. Real grief spills. Noah Anderson did not spill. He was tall, somewhere in his early to mid-30s, in a suit that was expensive but not ostentatious. The kind of suit that says, "I have money, but I don't need to prove it." His eyes were appropriately red, but Logan, who was sitting 8 feet away and watching closely, noted that the redness was around the edges in a way that looked more like a man who had spent time in a cold wind than a man who had been crying. His tie was slightly loose, but deliberately so slightly, just enough to signal distress without actually being disheveled. He spoke to the nurse at the front desk. His voice carried enough that Logan could hear it clearly. "My wife was brought in tonight, Claire Anderson. I've been out of cell range. I just got the call. I came as fast as I could. Is she... Please, can someone tell me if she's..." His voice broke on the last syllable. "Right on cue." The nurse, not Simmons, a different one, responded with exactly the kind of sympathetic efficiency that the display was designed to produce. A hushed conversation. A hand placed briefly on Noah's arm. The invisible rearrangement of the room's attention toward the grieving husband. Noah turned ostensibly to gather himself, and his eyes found Logan. The two men looked at each other across 8 feet of hospital waiting room. Logan did not look away. Noah Anderson had the kind of face that was used to being the most important face in any room. The kind of features that photographed well and projected a specific quality of trustworthiness that was Logan now understood completely entirely manufactured. In another context, he might have been a politician, a CEO, a man of standing whose standing was built on the willingness of others to take him at his word. But Logan Whitaker had spent 30 years in rooms where the men with the best faces were not always the men with the best intentions. He held Noah's gaze and did not move. Something crossed Noah's expression, a rapid recalibration there, and gone in a second. Then he looked away, back toward the nurse, his jaw working slightly. "Can you tell me who found my wife?" Noah asked. The nurse glanced toward Logan. Noah turned back. "You," he said. His voice had shifted slightly. Still pleasant, still controlled, but with something underneath it that Logan recognized as a man deciding how to play a situation. "Were you the one who, I found her in the ravine," Logan said. His voice was perfectly neutral. "My club was riding through and we saw the wreckage." Oh. Noah took 2 steps towards him, hand extended. "Then I owe you an enormous debt. I don't even know how to..." He shook his head, and the emotion that moved across his face was expertly calibrated. "I've been out of my mind since I got the call. Claire has been going through a difficult time, and I should have..." Another pause, strategically placed. Thank you for finding her." Logan shook the offered hand. It was cold. Not from the outside. Noah had been indoors long enough for that to have faded. The coldness was from something else. The particular body temperature of a person whose emotional center is running at a different rate than their performance. Logan had shaken hands with a lot of men in his life. He did not let this one linger. "She's in good hands," Logan said simply. "They've been working on her for about 2 hours." "Right." Noah nodded, glancing toward the corridor that led to the treatment rooms. "Did she say anything before they took her in?" And there it was. Logan had been expecting, it had been waiting for it from the moment he saw Noah Anderson walk through those doors, but the arrival of it still landed with a particular weight. The first question that is not, "Is she okay?" or "How bad is it?" or "What happened?" The first question that is, "What did she say?" "She was barely conscious," Logan said. Noah Anderson nodded slowly. He did not say "of course" or "God, that's terrible." He said "of course." He said it with his mouth while his eyes did something entirely different. "I'll let you know if there's anything I can do for you," Noah said. He had already turned back toward the front desk, already moved on. You and your club, you said, please pass on my gratitude. Logan watched him go. He sat back down. He took a breath, then he picked up his phone and sent Decker a single message. He's here. He's not who they think he is. We need to be very careful about what comes next. The baby was born at 2:44 in the morning. Logan knew because Nurse Simmons, who had over the course of 4 hours made her own quiet decision about where her loyalties in this situation lay, came out to find him specifically. She's okay, Simmons said, and her voice had that particular quality, that belonging to someone who has just witnessed something that reminded them why they chose their profession. Both of them. The baby's small, they'll need to watch her, but she's okay. She's breathing. Logan let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 4 hours. Claire's asking for you, Echo, Simmons added. Logan looked up. She said, Simmons paused. She said to find the man who stayed. He stood up. She also said to tell you, Simmons continued, something moving through her expression, that she needs you to know something before anyone else comes in that room. Logan was already following her down the corridor. The room was quiet and small and smelled like antiseptic and something faintly floral, the same perfume he'd caught in the wreckage, which meant someone had found her things and brought them in. Claire Anderson lay in the bed with monitors attached, in an IV running, in the particular fragile stillness of a person who has been through something enormous and is only now beginning to understand that they survived it. Her daughter was in a small unit beside her, small as Simmons had said, but clearly alive, clearly breathing, her chest rising and falling with the determined rhythm of someone who had decided to be here. Claire's eyes found Logan when he walked in. They were gray, he noticed now, in the light of the room with the fog and blood and darkness gone. Clear, steady gray like the water of a lake just before weather hits. The kind of eyes that have been watching the world very carefully for a very long time and have gotten good at it. You stayed, she said. I stayed, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Her hand moved toward her daughter's unit, her fingers resting against the clear wall. He's here, isn't he? She said. Noah's here. He arrived about 2 hours ago, Logan said carefully. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted, a decision made clearly and completely. I need to tell you something, Claire said, and I need you to understand that I am completely lucid, completely aware of what I'm saying, and that I've been waiting for a moment like this for a long time. A moment when there was someone in the room who was not afraid of my husband's last name. Logan pulled a chair close to her bedside and sat down. I'm listening, he said. She told him everything. The car, a black SUV, she had been driving alone because Noah had insisted she use it for the prenatal appointment. The appointment he had also insisted she attend in the town 30 miles away, rather than the clinic 5 minutes from their house. The route he had recommended. The specific stretch of highway. She had thought it was strange, had thought a lot of things were strange recently, but she had been managing strange for so long that she'd almost lost track of what normal felt like. 3 miles before the guardrail, the steering had gone. Not gradually, not the slow drift of a mechanical failure. Immediately. Completely. She'd pressed the brake and felt nothing, and she'd tried to turn the wheel and it had spun loose in her hands like something disconnected. She'd had exactly enough time to wrap both arms around her belly before the SUV went through the guardrail and into the dark. He had it serviced the week before, she said. He insisted on taking it himself. He never does that. He never does anything to do with the house or the cars or any of the practical things. He said he wanted to do something nice for me. Her jaw tightened. I thought it was strange. The police have the vehicle, Logan said quietly. Or they should. The police in this county, Claire said, have known Richard Anderson for 30 years. Logan held her gaze. My father-in-law, she said, has been managing the narrative of this family for longer than I've been in it. He is very good at it. He has had a lot of practice. She paused. When I found the estate documents 6 months ago, when I realized what I'd inherited from my grandmother and what that meant in the context of our marriage, I changed my will. I changed everything I could change. I made my daughter the primary beneficiary of everything, and I excluded Noah explicitly. Her chin lifted. He found out 2 weeks ago. I don't know how I was careful, but I know he found out because after that, something in him changed. The way he looked at me, the way he talked to me, the particular way he pretended everything was fine. Claire, Logan leaned forward slightly. Is any of this documented? The estate changes the service records for the vehicle. Anything that... My lawyer has everything, she said. Everything I could gather. I've been building a file for 4 months. She held his gaze without flinching. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what form it would take. Logan sat with that for a moment. You're going to need more than a file, he said. If what you're telling me is accurate and I believe you, then you're up against people who know how to make files disappear. I know, she said. Then why tell me? She looked at him for a long time. Because you came down that slope, she said finally. Because you held my hand in the dark. Because you didn't ask me who my husband was before you decided to help me. She glanced toward her daughter's unit. And because I have a daughter now who is going to grow up in this world, and I need her to know that the people who are supposed to protect you don't always, but that doesn't mean nobody will. Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my club has 200 riders in this region alone. We have chapters in 11 states. We have people who know how to find things, and people who know how to protect things, and people who understand what it means when someone with power tries to use that power to erase someone without it. He watched her face. We have been called a lot of things over the years, he continued. Criminal, dangerous, a threat to decent society. A slight pause. But we have never not once walked away from a person who needed us. Claire Anderson's eyes did something he hadn't seen them do yet. They filled, not with fear, not with despair, with something that looked, Logan thought, like the first real breath a person takes when they've been holding it for a very, very long time. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Outside the room through the small window in the door, Logan could see the corridor. And at the far end of the corridor, he could see Noah Anderson standing at the nurse's station. And Noah Anderson was watching the room. And Logan met his gaze through the glass. And for a long, clear, completely silent moment, across 30 feet of hospital corridor, across the particular distance between a man who has spent his life using power as a weapon and a man who has spent his life choosing when and where to stand, the two of them simply looked at each other. And Noah Anderson looked away first. At 3:15 in the morning, Logan Whitaker stepped out into the Glacier Valley Medical Center parking lot and made a phone call. By 3:17, Silver Ravens were on their way to the hospital. By 4 o'clock, Manny had pulled every public record connected to Noah Anderson, Richard Anderson, Valley Commerce Bank in the County Sheriff's Department. By 4:15, Logan had the name of an investigative journalist in Billings who had been trying to get someone to talk about the Anderson family for 2.5 years. By dawn, something had begun. Something that Noah Anderson, with all his connections and all his resources and all the years his family had spent making sure the right people looked the other way, had not planned for. 200 people who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Noah Anderson did not sleep that night. Logan knew this because he didn't sleep either, and for the 6 hours between 3 in the morning and 9 o'clock, he watched Noah through glass the way you watch a weather system. You don't trust, tracking it, measuring it, waiting for the moment it stops, pretending to be something harmless. Noah had been given a family waiting area down the hall from Claire's room. He sat in it with a cup of coffee he didn't drink and a phone he held but rarely looked at. And twice during those 6 hours, a hospital administrator came to speak with him in a low voice that carried the unmistakable tone of someone delivering a situation report rather than condolences. The second time, Noah had nodded slowly, said something brief, and the administrator had left looking satisfied. Logan filed that away. At 7:45, Decker arrived with 4 others and a change of clothes for Logan. They gathered in the far corner of the main waiting room, 5 big men in leather vests who drew looks from every direction and responded to none of them. And Decker laid out what Manny had pulled together overnight. Okay, Decker said quietly, spreading a folded paper on his knee. Valley Commerce Bank. Richard Anderson's baby. 3 branches, solid regional presence, nothing spectacular on the surface. But here's what's underneath. He tapped the paper. 18 months ago, the State Banking Commission opened a preliminary inquiry into some irregularities in commercial lending practices. Nothing public, nothing charges level, but it's there in the regulatory filings if you know what to look for. Meaning, said a lean, sharp-eyed man named Cruz, that Richard Anderson may have some exposure he doesn't want exposed. Meaning, Decker confirmed that Richard Anderson has been operating for years on the assumption that his relationships in this county make him untouchable. And that assumption has served him very well right up until he needed his son to commit a federal crime. Attempted murder, Logan said. Attempted murder, Decker agreed, of a pregnant woman, using a vehicle that was deliberately sabotaged, which if we can prove it is not a county matter, that's federal. And federal prosecutors don't go to the same dinner parties as Richard Anderson. Can we prove it? Cruz asked. Not yet, Decker said. But the vehicle is still in the ravine, or it was at last report. He looked at Logan. That may change. Someone needs to make sure it doesn't, Logan said immediately. Already on it. Tommy and Reese are up on that highway right now, and Manny's been on the phone with a certified auto forensics guy in Missoula. He can have someone there by noon. Logan nodded. He looked down at his hands. The cuts from the glass had been cleaned and bandaged by a nurse who hadn't asked questions, and they ached in the cold fluorescent light of the waiting room. He thought about Claire's voice in the dark. He had it serviced the week before. He thought about the particular looseness of that steering wheel in her description immediately, completely, and every mechanical instinct he'd built over a lifetime told him that kind of failure didn't happen by accident. There's something else, Decker said. Logan looked up. Decker's face had shifted, not dramatically, but enough. The particular tightening around the bow that meant he was about to say something he hadn't wanted to have to say. Noah's lawyer arrived 20 minutes ago, Decker said. A man named Grantham, Marcus Grantham. He practices out of Billings, but he's retained by the Anderson family going back 15 years. He paused. He's not here for Noah. Then who? He's here about the baby, Decker said. He filed a petition this morning. Emergency custody application. He's arguing that Claire's mental state makes her an unfit guardian and that the child should be placed in Noah's care pending a full psychological evaluation of the mother. The waiting room was already quiet, but something about the silence after Decker said that was a different kind of quiet entirely. Logan stood up. He filed it this morning, Logan said, while she was still in recovery, while the baby is 6 hours old, Decker confirmed. Cruz let out a sound that wasn't quite a word. Beside him, a man named Garrett, who had barely spoken since arriving, put both hands on his knees and looked at the ceiling for a moment in the way a person does when they're deciding whether to be angry right now or save it for later. Where's Grantham? Logan asked. He was in with hospital administration about an hour ago, Decker said. I don't know where he is now. Logan was already moving. He found Marcus Grantham in the corridor near the elevators, a compact silver-haired man in a charcoal suit who carried himself with the practiced confidence of someone who had never once walked into a room and felt like he didn't belong there. He was reviewing something on his phone with an expression of mild professional concentration, as if he were between meetings at a law firm rather than standing 40 feet from a room where a woman was recovering from an attempted murder. Mr. Grantham, Logan said. The lawyer looked up. His gaze traveled from Logan's face to his vest, to his bandaged hands, and back up again with the brief efficiency of a man who assesses everything in front of him and decides immediately how much of a problem it is. I'm afraid I don't. Logan Whitaker, I'm the one who found Claire Anderson last night. Logan kept his voice level. I understand you filed an emergency custody application this morning. Something moved behind Grantham's eyes, a small recalibration. I'm not at liberty to discuss any legal proceedings with... You filed it while she's still in recovery, Logan said, while her daughter is 6 hours old and in a neonatal unit down the hall. Mr. Whitaker, was it? Grantham's voice was smooth, practiced smooth, the kind of smooth that came from 1,000 rooms, where being smooth was the exact weapon needed. I understand you may have emotional investment in this situation given your involvement last night, but this is a legal matter between members of a family, and it is genuinely not appropriate for... The vehicle she was driving, Logan said, the steering failure. Has anyone from your client's legal team been in contact with the county sheriff's department about the wreck site? The smallest pause. Because, Logan continued, I have people up on that highway right now making sure that vehicle doesn't go anywhere before a forensics team can look at it. And I have a forensics specialist driving from Missoula as we speak. He held Grantham's gaze. I just want you to know that. Marcus Grantham was good. He was genuinely professionally good. His expression did not crack and his voice did not waver when he said, I see. Well, if there are legitimate questions about the cause of the accident, those will absolutely be investigated through appropriate channels. I'm sure they will, Logan said. Neither man moved for a moment. Then Grantham said, "Mr. Whitaker, I'll be honest with you. The Anderson family has a great deal of concern for Claire's well-being. Noah is devastated by what happened last night. His primary concern is for his wife and his child." The sentence was perfectly constructed, every word in the right place. "I would encourage you not to let a difficult night lead you toward conclusions that could cause more harm than good." "I appreciate that," Logan said. "I'd encourage the same thing." He walked back down the corridor. His hands, he noticed, were completely steady. That surprised him a little. He'd half expected them to be shaking. They weren't. They were the hands of a man who had made a decision. That tended to be steadying. At 9:15, a county sheriff's deputy named Fawkes arrived at the hospital. He was young, late 20s, maybe 30, with the slightly uncomfortable bearing of someone following instructions he hadn't written. He had a notepad and a recorder, and the particular expression of a person who has been told what questions to ask and is hoping the situation cooperates. He spoke to the nurse's station first. Then he was directed eventually toward Logan. "Mr. Whitaker." He had a good-natured face that was working very hard at professional neutrality. "I understand you were the individual who located the victim last night. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about what you observed at the scene." "Of course," Logan said. He sat down across from the deputy and answered every question with complete, precise accuracy. The time he spotted the wreckage, the smell of burning, the descent into the ravine, what he found, what he did, the approximate time the EMTs arrived. Fawkes wrote it all down. Then he said, "And did the victim make any statements to you during the time you were with her at the scene?" Logan looked at the deputy's face. He saw in the set of the young man's jaw the position of his pen, over the notepad, the slightly held quality of his breath, the answer that was being waited for. And he understood with complete and immediate clarity that this was not a question about gathering information. This was a question about confirming or denying a specific piece of information that someone had already reported, possibly that Noah had reported, possibly that the administrator had reported, possibly that any number of people who had been in motion since the name Anderson was spoken in this building had reported. "She said she needed help," Logan said. "She asked me to help her. She was focused on her baby." Fawkes wrote something. "She didn't make any statements about how the accident occurred." "She was barely conscious," Logan said. That was true. It was also not a complete answer to the question. Logan had been an honest man for 53 years, but he had also learned a long time ago that being honest does not mean being unstrategic. He had not lied. He had given the deputy less than he knew. The full truth, the complete truth, needed to land somewhere that could protect it. Not a notepad in the hands of a deputy whose superiors had been taking Richard Anderson's money for a decade. "Of course," Fawkes said. He clicked his pen. "One more thing. Are you planning to remain in the area, Mr. Whitaker?" "For the foreseeable future," Logan said. "Yes." Fawkes nodded, closed his notepad, and stood. He seemed, Logan thought, like a decent young man who had chosen a complicated profession in a complicated county and who was going to have to spend some time figuring out what kind of person he wanted to be when the comfortable options ran out. That reckoning would come. Logan could see it already forming behind the deputy's eyes. "Thank you for your time," Fawkes said, and left. Logan watched him go. Then he pulled out his phone and called Manny. "The deputy just left," he said. "Fawkes, what can you tell me about him?" "Already looked," Manny said. 3 years in clean record commendation for a domestic violence intervention last spring. His sergeant is a man named Briggs, who has attended 3 Anderson Family Foundation events in the last 2 years and is on record donating to the sheriff's re-election campaign. So Fawkes is probably fine, Logan said. Briggs is probably not. That's my read. Okay. Logan was quiet for a moment. "Manny, the estate documents, the changes Claire made to her will. She said her lawyer has copies, but she also said she was careful, which probably means there are copies somewhere besides the lawyer's office. You want me to find out where? I want you to think about where a careful woman who was afraid of her husband would put copies of documents she didn't want to disappear." A pause. "Safety deposit box, or scanned copies in a cloud account her husband doesn't know about. Maybe both. If we need them, can we get them? If she authorizes it, yes, easily." "Good," Logan said. "I'll ask her." He hung up and sat for a moment with the particular weight of the situation settling fully onto him. It was a familiar weight, not comfortable but known. The weight of being in the middle of something that had already started and couldn't be stopped, only steered. He'd felt it before in different contexts with different stakes. He'd learned over the years that the weight either crushed you or clarified you. There was rarely a middle ground. It was clarifying him. That was good. He stood up and went to find Claire. She was awake. She had her daughter in her arms, the nurses had allowed it, monitoring cables and all, and she was looking down at the baby with an expression that Logan had no words for and didn't try to find any. Some expressions don't need translation. Some things a human face does are older than language and more complete. She looked up when Logan came in. They filed a custody petition, she said. Yes, Logan said. She nodded. She wasn't surprised. That somehow was the thing that moved him most. She had expected it. She had been expecting moves like this for months. Grantham, she said. Marcus Grantham. He's been Richard's lawyer since I was in college. He once told me at a dinner party that family is the most important thing in the world. Her voice was entirely flat. He said it while Richard was across the room making a phone call to have a former employee's union complaint dismissed. Logan sat down. We need to talk about your documents, the copies of your estate changes. Digital copies in a Google account Noah doesn't know exists, she said without hesitation. The email is my grandmother's name and my high school graduation year. My family lawyer in Bozeman has physical copies. And my college roommate in Seattle, Dana, has a sealed envelope in her safe that I mailed her 8 months ago. She paused. I told her not to open it unless I told her to, or unless something happened to me. Logan looked at her. You planned for this. I've been planning for this since March, Claire said. Since I found the will documents and realized how much money was in play and understood completely clearly what kind of man I had married. She looked down at her daughter. I just didn't know if I'd be alive to execute any of it. You're alive, Logan said. I'm alive, she said, and something in her voice on that word, not relief exactly, but something more complicated. The particular disbelief of someone who calculated their own survival and got the math right made it the most powerful 2 words Logan had heard in a very long time. I need you to call Dana, he said. Today, this morning if you can. Tell her to open the envelope and to get those documents to your lawyer by end of business today. And give me access to the digital account, not the password, just the account name, and I'll have our person pull what we need. And then what? She asked. And then, Logan said, we get in front of the custody petition before it gets momentum. He watched her absorb this. She shifted her daughter slightly, a gentle automatic adjustment, the kind a mother makes without thinking. And then she said, Logan, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me honestly. Always, he said. Why are you doing this? She met his eyes directly. No deflection, no performance. Just the question. You don't know me. You have no obligation here. You have your club and your life, and Noah's father is a man who can make life very difficult for people who challenge him. So why? Logan was quiet for a moment. He thought about the answer he could give, the one about brotherhood, about the Silver Raven's code, about duty and honor, and the things they stood for. All of it true, all of it real. But that wasn't the complete answer. I had a daughter, he said, and a wife 7 years ago. There was a situation, a man, someone with money, someone connected. He drove drunk at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and he crossed the center line. He stopped. My wife died at the scene. My daughter died 3 days later. She was 4 years old. Claire's breath caught. The man, Logan continued, had a very good lawyer and a judge who owed his family something, and he served 14 months. He held Claire's gaze. There was no one in that courtroom who wasn't afraid of what his family could do. No one stood up. No one pushed back. He paused. I think about that every day. I think about what might have been different if there had been someone, anyone, who was willing to be more afraid of the injustice than of the man. The room was very quiet. I'm not afraid of Noah Anderson, Logan said, and I'm not afraid of Richard Anderson. And until you and your daughter are safe, completely legally, permanently safe, I'm not going anywhere. Claire Anderson looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at her daughter. Her name, she said softly. I've been thinking about it since you asked me in the car. I want to name her after someone strong. She paused. Her middle name. I want it to be a name that means someone fought for her before she even knew she needed fighting for. Logan didn't say anything. Would that be all right? She asked. He had to look away for a moment. When he looked back, his voice was steady. It would be more than all right, he said. The door opened. Nurse Simmons stood in the frame, and her expression carried the specific quality of someone delivering news they wish they didn't have to deliver. Mrs. Anderson, she said carefully, Mr. Anderson is asking to come in. He's been asking for the past hour, and Dr. Rice has said that... She paused. I wanted to give you the choice. Claire's jaw tightened. Her arms pulled her daughter fractionally closer. Not yet, she said. Not until I have my lawyer on the phone. Tell him, she stopped. Rethought. Tell him I'm resting and the baby needs quiet. Give me 2 hours. Simmons nodded. She glanced at Logan, and Logan nodded once, and Simmons left. 2 hours. Logan pulled out his phone. Claire reached for hers. They had 2 hours to do what they could before Noah Anderson walked into that room. They used every minute. By 11 in the morning, Claire's lawyer, a sharp, calm woman named Patricia Oakes, who had been in family law for 22 years and had a voice like carved stone, was on speakerphone. By 11:20, the digital documents had been accessed and sent to Oakes' office. By 11:40, Dana in Seattle had opened the envelope, photographed every page, and uploaded them to a shared drive that Oakes now controlled. By 11:55, Oakes had filed a counter motion challenging the emergency custody application and had contacted a colleague at the Federal Public Defender's Office who specialized in domestic violence cases. I want to be clear with you, Claire, Oakes said through the phone. The emergency custody application is aggressive, but it's standard playbook for this kind of situation. They're trying to create leverage. A judge who's sympathetic to the Anderson family sees this petition, he might grant a temporary order pending review, and temporary orders have a way of lasting longer than they should. We need to move fast. What do we need? Claire asked. Evidence that the crash was not an accident, Oakes said simply. Everything else we can fight on procedural grounds and drag out. But if we can demonstrate attempted murder, if we can get the forensics on that vehicle and build a criminal case, then the custody application collapses on its own. Nobody grants a father custody who is under active criminal investigation for trying to kill the mother. The vehicle, Logan said. My people are up there right now. Are they documented? Oakes asked. Can they testify to chain of custody that the scene hasn't been disturbed, that nothing's been moved or removed? Logan thought of Tommy and Reese parked up on that highway in the cold watching. He thought of the photo documentation he'd asked for. Yes, he said, completely. Good, Oakes said. Get your forensics man there as fast as possible. And Logan, she hadn't been introduced to him by name, but she'd been paying attention. If that vehicle disappears before the forensics team arrives, we lose a major piece of this puzzle. Do you understand? Oh, I understand it, he said. Then I'd suggest you make some phone calls. He was already making them before the line disconnected. He reached Manny first, then Tommy, directly, then the forensics specialist from Missoula, a methodical, unhurried man named Bergstrom who said he was 90 minutes out and who asked 3 very specific questions about the vehicle's position and the condition of the brake and steering lines that told Logan immediately that Bergstrom knew exactly what he was looking for. The lines, Bergstrom said, if it was intentional, you're looking for cuts or compressions that are too clean, a natural failure phrase, and interference cuts. The difference is visible if you know what you're seeing, and it holds up in court if it's documented properly. A pause. Is there any possibility the vehicle has already been moved? Logan thought about the county sheriff's department, about Briggs, about the efficiency with which a man named Marcus Grantham had filed a custody application at 9 in the morning after his client's wife nearly died the night before. I don't know, he said honestly. Get there as fast as you can. Bergstrom said he would. Logan hung up. He looked at the clock, 11:58. 2 minutes before Noah Anderson's window opened, and the man with the perfect face and the manufactured grief would walk back into this narrative and try to take control of it. The door opened. But it wasn't Noah. It was Decker, and Decker's face said everything before he spoke a word. Logan, he said quietly, we have a problem. Logan stepped out into the corridor and pulled the door mostly closed behind him. The vehicle, Decker said. Tommy just called. A county tow truck showed up 20 minutes ago. Said they had orders to impound the wreck for a routine accident investigation. Logan felt something cold move through him. Tommy and Reese stopped them. Decker said quickly and physically. They stood in front of the truck, and Tommy told the driver politely, calmly, but absolutely clearly that the vehicle was evidence in a potential criminal case, and that if he moved it before a forensics team had documented the scene, Tommy would personally make sure that the driver's name was in every court filing related to that case. And the driver called his dispatcher, and the dispatcher, who was apparently not expecting to deal with two large silver ravens at 7 in the morning, said he'd check on the authorization and call back. Decker paused. He hasn't called back, but he hasn't moved the truck either. Bergstrom is 90 minutes out, Logan said. Then we need Tommy and Reese to hold that line for 90 minutes, Decker said, which they can do. But Logan, he dropped his voice lower. The fact that a tow truck showed up that fast, on a Sunday morning, with impound authorization already in hand. I know, Logan said. Someone made a phone call last night. I know. And that phone call went somewhere with enough authority to mobilize county equipment before 8 in the morning on a weekend. I know, Decker. Logan looked at him. That's why Bergstrom needs to get there. Decker nodded. Then there's one more thing. Logan waited. 2 local news crews are outside, Decker said. Apparently Noah Anderson made a statement to them about 45 minutes ago in the parking lot. He was by all accounts very compelling. He talked about how worried he was, how much he loved his wife, how this had been such a difficult pregnancy emotionally, and how Claire had been struggling. He mentioned that he hoped people would respect the family's privacy. Decker paused. One of the reporters is already running a story framing this as a tragic accident involving a woman with a complicated mental health history. Logan said nothing for a moment. He was thinking about 47 bikes stretched along a highway in the dark and a woman's hand on his wrist and the certainty in her voice when she told the truth. He was thinking about the 14 months a drunk driver served for 2 lives. He was thinking about what it meant to be afraid of the wrong things. Okay, he said. Okay, what? Decker asked. Get me the name of the reporter, Logan said. Not to stop her. I want to talk to her. Properly. On the record. Decker looked at him. You sure about that? She's going to write a story regardless, Logan said. The question is whether that story has only Noah Anderson's version of events in it, or whether it also has mine. He straightened his vest. And I have a woman in that room who survived a burning car in a Montana ravine on a November night, and I have a daughter 6 hours old who has a name she hasn't been told yet, and I have 200 people who stopped what they were doing in the middle of a freezing storm because the right thing to do was obvious even in the dark. He looked at Decker. I think that's a story worth telling, he said. He went back to the door of Claire's room. He looked through the small window. She was on the phone. Oaks probably or Dana and her daughter was in her arms, and her face had the particular combination of exhaustion and determination that Logan had come to recognize in the past 12 hours as simply the way Claire Anderson's face looked when she was fighting. He pushed the door open and spoke quietly so as not to interrupt her call. There's a reporter outside, he said. If you are willing, I think we should talk to her. Claire looked up from the phone. She didn't hesitate. She covered the receiver and said, yes, but I talk, not just you, me. Absolutely, Logan said. She went back to her call. He stepped back out. Down the corridor at the far end, Noah Anderson had appeared. He was moving toward the room with a hospital administrator beside him in the particular energy of a man who has decided to stop waiting. Marcus Grantham was 2 steps behind him. Logan stepped into the center of the corridor. Noah stopped walking. The 2 men looked at each other across 40 feet of linoleum. Behind Noah, Grantham murmured something. Noah didn't move, didn't speak. His eyes were doing the work, processing, calculating, measuring. Logan didn't move either. He simply stood there in the center of the corridor in his road-worn leather vest with the silver ravens patch on the back, and he held Noah Anderson's gaze with the complete, unhurried calm of a man who had already decided what he was willing to do and what he was not, and who had no interest in pretending otherwise. It was the hospital administrator who moved first, stepping slightly in front of Noah, saying something about visiting arrangements and recovery protocols and the need to speak with nursing staff before entry. Noah didn't look at the administrator. He looked at Logan, and then he smiled. It was a small smile, controlled, the kind of smile that says this isn't over without saying anything at all. Logan held his gaze and did not smile back. Noah turned back toward Grantham and said something quiet and the two of them retreated down the corridor toward the family waiting area. The administrator looked at Logan with an expression of profound uncertainty about what she had just witnessed. Logan looked at her. "She'll be ready for visitors in 2 hours," he said pleasantly. "Maybe 3. He went back to the door. Inside, Claire had ended her call. She was looking down at her daughter with an expression Logan hadn't seen on her face before. Not fear, not exhaustion, not the steeled-down determination of a person fighting. Something softer, something that was, he understood, the first purely unguarded moment she'd allowed herself since before the car went over the guardrail. "What did Oakes say?" he asked. "She filed the counter motion," Claire said, "and she thinks if the forensics on the car come through, we have a real case. Not just a family court case, a criminal case." "Bergstrom's on his way," Logan said, "and Tommy and Reese are making sure the scene doesn't get touched." She nodded, looked back down at her daughter. Then she said very quietly, "When I was down in that ravine in those first minutes, before I heard you, I had a conversation with myself." A pause. "I told myself that if nobody came, I needed to stay anyway. I needed to hold on anyway. Not for me, for her." Her voice dropped even lower. "I told her, I whispered it right against my belly. I said, somebody's coming. Somebody always comes. I didn't believe it, but I said it." Logan was quiet. "I need to believe it now," Claire said. "I need to believe it for the next part of this, whatever the next part is. Because I know what they're going to do. I know how they fight. I've watched Richard Anderson fight for years. He doesn't give up ground. He doesn't back down. He finds new angles." "So do we," Logan said. She looked up at him. "There's a reporter outside," he said again gently, "and Bergstrom is on the road. And Patricia Oakes is at her desk on a Sunday because she believes you. And I have 200 people who are already right now making sure this story doesn't get buried." He paused. "Nobody's coming," he said. "We're already here." Claire Anderson looked at him for a long moment. Then she straightened in her bed, shifted her daughter in her arms, and said, "All right, let's get to work." Outside in the parking lot, Noah Anderson was making another phone call. And in a wrecking yard on the edge of a highway on a Montana mountainside, a tow truck driver was waiting for instructions that hadn't come. And 90 minutes away, a forensics specialist named Bergstrom was pushing his truck as fast as the roads allowed, because something in the urgency of the voice on the phone had told him that 90 minutes might be exactly the difference between everything and nothing. And across 11 states, word was spreading through a network of motorcycle clubs and community contacts. And people who had once been told they were the problem, spreading the way things spread when they matter quickly and without needing to be asked twice. The Silver Ravens didn't know yet everything that the next 48 hours would require of them, but they were already moving. And that Logan had learned over 30 years was usually enough. Bergstrom arrived at 11:53. 7 minutes before the 90-minute mark, Logan had calculated, which meant the man had pushed his truck harder than he'd let on during the phone call. Logan knew this because Tommy texted the moment Bergstrom pulled up, and the timestamp told the story. When a man moves faster than he said he would, he understands the stakes. That told Logan something important about Bergstrom before they'd even met face to face. The tow truck driver had finally received his callback at 11:40. The callback, according to Tommy's account, came from someone at the dispatcher's office who said, and Tommy quoted this with the particular precision of a man who knows when exact words matter, "Hold your position pending further authorization," which meant someone somewhere up the chain had decided that the optics of forcibly moving potential evidence past 2 Silver Ravens, while a forensics specialist was en route, was a problem they didn't want to create yet. Not yet. Logan understood the yet completely. He was back at the hospital when this happened, coordinating between Bergstrom's arrival, Patricia Oakes on the phone, and the reporter's situation unfolding in the parking lot. The reporter's name was Sandra Vale, 38 staff writer for the Billings Courier, with a reputation for being fair and thorough that Manny had confirmed in about 4 minutes of research. She had been contacted by Noah Anderson's people first, which meant the shape of her initial story had been poured into a mold she didn't yet know was crooked. Manny had also found something else about Sandra Vale. 2 years ago, she had started writing a series about domestic violence cases in rural Montana that had stalled out because her subjects kept recanting, kept going quiet, kept disappearing back into the situations they'd tried to leave. The series was never finished. The reason Manny said reading from a journalism review piece was that Vail had been unable to find a single case where the protective system's legal, medical, social had held long enough for the story to have an ending worth telling. Logan read that and thought, give her this one. He sent Decker down to the parking lot to establish initial contact while he finished coordinating with Oakes. He needed Vail in the right frame of mind before Claire spoke to her, not primed with a specific narrative, but cleared of the one Noah had already started building. That meant Decker, who had the particular gift of making large tattooed men seem completely unthreatening, would spend 15 minutes simply being honest with her. Not pitching, not spinning, just telling her what he'd seen on that highway at 2 a.m. Decker could do that. Decker was good at being real. At 12:10, Bergstrom called Logan directly. "I've got the vehicle," he said. His voice was completely flat in the way that professionals get when they are processing something significant and managing their reaction to it simultaneously. "I need you to listen carefully." Logan listened. "The brake lines have been compromised," Bergstrom said, "both front and rear. The method used is what we call a slow bleed compromise. It's not a clean cut. It's a partial cut designed to allow the brake system to function normally under regular use but fail under sustained pressure, like the pressure you'd need on a mountain road with extended descents." A pause. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. This is not amateur work. The cuts are placed at a point on the line where they would be very difficult to detect in a standard service inspection, but the effect under the right conditions is catastrophic and total. Logan's jaw tightened. The power steering line has been compromised as well. Again, partial deliberate designed to degrade under sustained stress. On a flat road in good conditions, she might have driven that vehicle for weeks without any indication of a problem. Another pause. On a mountain road in a Montana winter in the dark at speed, with extended braking, it was only a matter of when, not if. Logan said nothing for a moment. He was standing in a corridor of Glacier Valley Medical Center, and he was thinking about an 8 months pregnant woman in the dark pressing brakes that gave her nothing, turning a wheel that turned in her hands like it was disconnected from everything. "Bergstrom," he said, "can you document this completely legally in a way that holds up?" "I'm photographing everything right now," Bergstrom said. "I want to take physical samples of the line material at the compromise points. I'm going to need the vehicle transported to a controlled facility where a second examiner can independently verify my findings." "Can you arrange that?" "Yes. I have a contact at a state-certified auto forensics lab in Missoula, but I need chain of custody documentation from this moment forward, and I need someone with legal authority to authorize the transport, not county authority." His emphasis on those last two words was precise. State or federal. "I'll make a call," Logan said. He hung up and immediately called Oakes. Patricia Oakes had been in family law for 22 years, but she had also spent the first 8 of those years in the county prosecutor's office before going private. She knew people. She had, as she once described it to a colleague, a very particular Rolodex for very particular situations. "I need a state-level authorization for forensic preservation of evidence," Logan said. "Vehicle, potential criminal tampering. The local sheriff's department cannot be in the chain of custody." Oakes was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Give me 20 minutes, she said. 17 minutes later, she called back. "I have a contact at the Montana Department of Justice Criminal Investigation Bureau. Her name is Agent Harriet Doyle, and she is personally authorizing the forensic transport. Bergstrom needs to contact her directly." She gave Logan the number. "Logan, if Bergstrom's findings are what you've described to me, this moves out of family court entirely. This is a criminal matter at the state level. Noah Anderson is going to be investigated for attempted murder." "Good," Logan said. "That's the good news," Oakes said. He waited. "The bad news is that between now and the time a criminal case is formally opened, Noah and Richard Anderson are going to move. Fast. They're going to move on the custody application. They're going to move on Claire's credibility, and they're going to try to create as much legal and public noise as possible to muddy the water before the forensics become official." She paused. "I have been in this kind of fight before, Logan. The side with more money usually wins the first few rounds, even when they're completely wrong. We need to be ready for that." "What do we need?" "Claire needs to be moved to a secure facility," Oakes said. "Not here. This hospital has already demonstrated that it responds to Anderson pressure. I want her somewhere with staff who don't recognize that name as anything special. I have a contact at St. Francis in Missoula. She just delivered, Logan said. The baby is in neonatal care. I know. Oakes's voice was measured. But a 6-hour-old infant in a neonatal unit here at a hospital where the Anderson family has social relationships and the county sheriff has administrative authority is a 6-hour-old infant who could theoretically be made the subject of an emergency medical placement order that gives Noah temporary physical access. She let that land. I am not saying that will happen today. I am saying I have seen it happen, and I would like to make the environment one where it cannot. Logan absorbed this. How fast can you move on the transfer? If Claire consents, and it has to be completely her decision, and if the medical team says the baby is stable enough to transport, I can have an ambulance authorized and a receiving team ready at St. Francis within 4 hours. I'll talk to her, Logan said. He found Claire exactly where he'd left her, sitting up in the bed, daughter-in-arms phone on the pillow beside her with the focused expression of a woman running multiple calculations simultaneously. She had been talking to Dana in Seattle. She had been talking to her own mother, who Logan learned was now on a flight from Portland, who had spent the last 4 years being systematically cut off from her daughter by a son-in-law who had too many clever reasons for every visit that didn't happen and every call that went too long without being returned. When Logan laid out Oakes's concerns about the hospital and the transfer, Claire listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. If I leave, she said, he'll use it. He'll say I'm unstable. He'll say I'm erratic. He'll say I'm making irrational decisions out of paranoid fear. Yes, Logan said. Probably. But if I stay, she said, he has home field advantage in a stadium he helped build. Also, yes. She looked at her daughter. Can the baby travel? Is she stable enough? That's what we need to find out from the medical team, Logan said. If they say she's not ready, we find another approach. But if they say she can make the transfer safely, then the decision is yours to make. Claire called for the attending physician. The doctor, a calm, unhurried woman named Dr. Rice, who had Logan noticed been consistently the one medical staff member whose behavior hadn't shifted when the name Anderson entered the picture, listened to the transfer question with professional seriousness. She asked 3 specific questions about the receiving facility at St. Francis. She reviewed the baby's current vitals and the monitoring equipment available for transport. Then she said, the infant is small but stable. Her respiratory function is good. A properly equipped transport with neonatal monitoring capability, which St. Francis can provide, is medically manageable in my opinion. I will not tell you it carries 0 risk. I will tell you that the risk is low and that a mother's ability to feel secure in her environment is itself a factor in both her recovery and her infant's care. Claire looked at Dr. Rice for a moment. Thank you for being straight with me. Of course, Dr. Rice said, and something in her voice said that straightness had not been the easiest thing to provide in this building this morning, and that she was aware of that and that she had chosen it anyway. Then we go, Claire said. The next 40 minutes move the way things move when there are enough people working in the same direction, at the same speed, not chaotically, but with the particular accelerating rhythm of a situation gaining momentum. Oakes confirmed the St. Francis arrangements. The transport ambulance was authorized. Dr. Rice coordinated with the neonatal team. Maya, who had arrived at the hospital 2 hours earlier and had spent the time systematically creating relationships with every nurse on the floor, who showed any independence from the administrative pressure, now deployed those relationships to handle the discharge paperwork with a speed that would normally take 3 times as long. Logan went to find Decker and Sandra Vale. They were in a corner of the main waiting room. Decker with his coffee, Vale with her recorder on the table, and a notebook full of handwriting, and the expression of a woman who has just had the shape of a story she thought she understood rearranged in front of her. She looked up when Logan sat down. Mr. Whitaker, she said, but your colleague has been telling me about what happened on that highway last night. Then you have a more accurate picture than the one you were given this morning, Logan said. Vale studied him. She had the careful eyes of someone whose profession had taught her to distrust everyone and evaluate everything, but whose instincts were still strong enough that she trusted them when they were insistent. Noah Anderson told me his wife has a history of anxiety and depression, that she had been having a difficult pregnancy, that she had a history of erratic behavior. that he was deeply worried about her and that last night's accident was, in his words, not entirely surprising, given her state of mind. What he told you, Logan said, is the narrative he has been building for 4 years. It is designed to make any claim she makes about him sound like the product of an unstable mind rather than the account of a woman who was telling the truth. You're saying the crash was not an accident. I'm saying a forensic specialist is on that vehicle right now and will have findings available through official channels within hours, Logan said. I'm saying those findings will be submitted to the Montana Department of Justice Criminal Investigation Bureau, not the county sheriff's department. And I'm saying that the woman in that room who survived that crash, who protected her child during that crash, who told me the truth in a ravine in the dark at 2 a.m, when there was no reason to lie and every reason to simply lose consciousness, has a story that deserves to be told correctly. Vale's pen hadn't moved. Can I speak with her? That is her decision, Logan said. Come with me. He had checked with Claire before coming to find Vale. The answer had been immediate, yes, bring her. What happened in that room in the next 40 minutes was something Logan would think about for a long time afterward. He sat against the wall and watched Claire Anderson talk to Sandra Vale, the way he imagined a dam opens after being held long enough, not explosively, not in a rush, but with the steady, unstoppable momentum of water that has found its channel. She was precise. She was specific. She did not editorialize or embellish or perform distress she was not feeling. She stated facts. She cited dates. She described the 4-year architecture of a marriage built to make one person's reality invisible to everyone around her. Vale asked good questions. She asked them the way a careful reporter asks things, not leading, not challenging, but probing at the joints where a fabricated story would flex and a true one would hold. Every time she pressed, Claire held. Not because she was prepared, she hadn't scripted this. Because the truth is a structure that doesn't require rehearsal, it simply requires remembering. At one point, Vale asked, why did you stay? If things were as you described, why didn't you leave earlier? And Claire was quiet for a long moment before she said, because he made me believe I was the problem. For years, he did it so well that I believed it completely. And by the time I stopped believing it, I was pregnant, and I was alone, and I understood exactly what his family was capable of, and I was building a case instead of running, because running would have lost me my daughter before I even had her. Vale wrote that down, every word. At that moment, Logan's phone buzzed. He stepped half out of the room to read the message. It was from Manny. Check your email. You need to see this right now. Logan opened his email. What he saw there sent a cold current straight through his chest. Manny had pulled financial records, legally accessible regulatory filings, banking commission documents, publicly available court records, and had assembled them into a picture that was both more complicated and more damning than anything they'd discussed the night before. Valley Commerce Bank had not simply been under a preliminary inquiry 18 months ago. The inquiry had escalated, quietly, the kind of quiet that happens when powerful people have advance notice and begin managing a situation before it becomes public. The escalation had been triggered by a pattern of insider lending commercial loans issued to companies with direct ownership ties to Richard Anderson at rates and on terms that bore no relationship to standard banking practice. The companies, on closer examination, were shells. Several of them pointed through layers of incorporation to accounts in the names of family members, including Noah Anderson, including a holding company that Noah Anderson had established. Logan checked the date twice to make sure he was reading it correctly 14 months ago. 1 month before Claire's grandmother died and the inheritance became real. Manny's note at the bottom read, he needed the family business clean before Claire's money came in. Whatever he was planning, it was planned before the pregnancy. This goes back further than the car. Logan read that 3 times. Then he called Manny. Are these documents solid? He said immediately. They're all public record, Manny said. Nothing I pulled requires access I don't have. A good forensic accountant could build a complete picture from these in a day. But the outline is right there if you know how to look. A pause. Logan, Richard Anderson has been running this for years. Noah's involvement in the holding company, the timing of it, right when Claire's inheritance became real, that's not coincidence. This is bigger than a custody fight, Logan said. This is a federal bank fraud investigation waiting to happen, Manny said. And the attempted murder of Claire is connected to it. If she dies and Noah inherits and controls her estate, That money gets absorbed into a structure that already has federal attention on it. He might have thought he was cleaning up two problems at once. Oaks needs this, Logan said. Already sent it to her, Manny said. 3 minutes ago. Logan hung up. He stood in the corridor and let the magnitude of it fully settle. This was not a domestic dispute. This was not a family court battle over a bitter divorce. This was a criminal enterprise that had tried to murder a woman and an unborn child to protect itself, and it had been operating in plain sight in a county where the right people had been paid enough not to look. He went back into Claire's room. Vale was finishing her notes. Claire was watching Logan's face as he came in, reading it the way people read faces when they know the person and know that the face is carrying something. "What?" Claire said immediately. Logan looked at Vale. "Can I speak with Claire privately for a moment?" Vale nodded, gathered her things, and stepped out. Logan sat down. He told Claire what Manny had found. He told her about the holding company, about the timing, about the bank inquiry. He watched her face as he told it. She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone who has been handed the last piece of a puzzle they've been staring at for months. "The account," she said quietly. "When I went through our finances last spring, I found a transfer I didn't recognize. A quarterly transfer from one of our joint accounts into something I'd never seen before. A company name I didn't recognize. When I asked Noah about it, he said it was an investment vehicle his father set up and that I didn't need to worry about it." Her voice was steady. "I documented it. It's in the files with Oaks." "It connects," Logan said. "Manny thinks it connects directly to the holding company." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "So it wasn't just about my inheritance. It was about the whole structure. If I'm gone and my money comes to him, it disappears into something that's already under investigation. And then two problems become one," Logan said, "which becomes none if no one looks." "He underestimated me," she said. "He did," Logan said. "And he underestimated you," she added, looking at him directly. "He didn't know about me," Logan said. "That's a little different." Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, but the architecture of one. "Call Oaks," she said, "and send Sandra back in. I have more to tell her." Vale came back. Logan called Oaks. Oaks, when she heard the financial information, was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Logan checked his phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Logan," she said finally, "I need to make a call to the FBI field office in Billings." "Do it," he said. "This changes the timeline," she said. "If federal investigators move on this, it accelerates everything. It also means that Noah and Richard Anderson are going to feel the pressure coming, and they're going to move faster than we thought." Another pause. "We need Claire out of that hospital in the next 2 hours." "The ambulance." "I'm confirming it right now. 2 hours. Tell her to be ready." He told her. She was ready in 90 minutes. What Logan didn't know, what no one on their side knew yet, was that Noah Anderson was also making calls. The first call went to Marcus Grantham. The second went to his father. Richard Anderson had spent 40 years building an empire on the confidence that problems could be managed. He had managed labor disputes and regulatory inquiries, and a journalist who got too close in 2019, and a former employee whose wrongful termination suit had been approaching dangerous territory before a settlement that included an NDA appeared like a solved equation. He had managed all of it with the same operating principle: identify the point of pressure, apply the counterpressure, and wait for the problem to redirect itself. He was applying that principle now, and he was doing it the way a man does who has never once had an application fail. He called 2 people at the county level. He called Marcus Grantham with specific instructions about the custody application. He called a contact at the State Banking Commission, a man who owed him a long-standing favor, and had a conversation that was entirely friendly and entirely about nothing specific, which was the most effective kind of warning Richard Anderson knew how to give. And then he did something he had not done in a long time. He got in his car, and he drove to Glacier Valley Medical Center himself. Logan was in the corridor outside Claire's room when Richard Anderson walked through the main entrance. He knew immediately who it was. Not because he'd seen a photograph Manny had provided several, but because of the way the room responded to the man. The way a hospital administrator who had been crossing toward the elevator changed course and moved toward the entrance instead. The way 2 nurses at the station straightened imperceptibly. The way the entire environment adjusted its center of gravity toward this one person the moment he walked in. This was a man who had always been the most important person in every room he entered, and he walked like he knew it. Richard Anderson was in his late 60s, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had once been conventionally handsome and had aged into something more formidable. Not threatening exactly, authoritative. The particular authority of a man who has never had to raise his voice because the rooms were always arranged in his favor before he arrived. He spotted Logan with the same efficiency with which Logan had spotted him. A rapid assessment, a recalibration, a decision made quickly and quietly about how to proceed. He walked directly toward him. "Mr. Whitaker," he said. His voice was exactly what Logan had expected. Warm, measured, carrying the texture of a man who wanted to seem like he was having a conversation while actually giving a speech. "I've been hearing about you all morning. I understand you're the man who found my daughter-in-law last night. I owe you a great deal." "You don't owe me anything," Logan said. "I insist," Richard extended his hand. "What you did stopping in those conditions, going down that slope, that took real courage. The kind of thing most people talk about and very few people actually do." Logan shook the hand. It was warm, dry, and confident. The hand of a man who had shaken 10,000 hands and made every one of them feel like a privilege. "My family is grateful," Richard said. "Deeply grateful, and I hope that whatever you may have heard about the circumstances of this situation from whatever source you understand, that we are equally concerned about Claire's well-being. Whatever difficulties exist in her marriage to Noah, she is the mother of our grandchild, and we want nothing but the best for both of them." "That's good to hear," Logan said. "I do want to say—" Richard's voice shifted almost imperceptibly. Still warm, still measured, but with something underneath it now, like the change in a river's surface when the current below it changes direction. "I understand that you've engaged with legal counsel on Claire's behalf, and with a forensics team. I respect that impulse. I want you to know that we have no interest in obstructing any legitimate investigation." He paused. "But I also want you to understand, because you seem like a perceptive man, that situations like this are complex. There are often explanations for things that look one way from the outside and are quite different when seen clearly. And there are sometimes consequences, unintended consequences, when outside parties involve themselves in family matters they don't fully understand." There it was. Logan had been waiting for it. It was beautifully done. Every element of it, the gratitude, the warmth, the apparent reasonableness, the framing of it as concern was precisely calibrated. Consequences as a word, not a threat. Family matters as a frame that excluded Logan from having any legitimate stake. Explanations as the implicit suggestion that evidence might not mean what it appeared to mean. Logan looked at Richard Anderson for a moment. Then he said, "I appreciate you coming down here personally. That tells me something about how seriously you're taking this situation." Richard nodded as if accepting a compliment. "I want to be honest with you," Logan said, "because I think you're a man who respects honesty." He held Richard's gaze steadily. "The forensics team has already found what they found. That information is already in the hands of Patricia Oakes and on its way to Agent Harriet Doyle at the Montana Department of Justice Criminal Investigation Bureau. The financial records that connect your son's holding company to the bank inquiry are already with your daughter-in-law's attorney." He paused. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that the window for managing this situation through the channels you're accustomed to using has closed. What happens from here happens in rooms where the Anderson family's history in this county means considerably less than it does in this hospital corridor." Richard Anderson's face did something very small. Not a crack, not a break, but something that lived just behind the warmth, went out like a pilot light that had been running for so long everyone had forgotten it was there. "I see," he said. "I hope you do," Logan said. For the first time in what Logan suspected was a very long time, Richard Anderson had nothing to say. He looked at Logan for another moment. Then he turned without another word and walked back toward the entrance. Logan watched him go. His hands were steady. They were always steady now. At 2:17 that afternoon, the ambulance carrying Claire and her daughter pulled out of the Glacier Valley Medical Center bay. Oakes had confirmed the St. Francis receiving team. Dr. Rice had signed off on the transport. Maya was in the ambulance. Logan followed in his bike, and behind him, without anyone asking or organizing, 11 silver ravens fell into formation. Not threatening, not aggressive. Just present. Just the 11 people who had decided that the convoy around this ambulance mattered, and who had shown up to be part of it in the same simple, complete way They had shown up on a frozen highway the night before when a burning car at the bottom of a ravine needed people to stop. As the convoy moved through the town, people watched. Some of them had seen Noah Anderson's statement on the morning news. Some of them had grown up knowing the Anderson name as synonymous with civic standing and quiet power. Some of them had spent their lives giving that name a wide berth without quite knowing why, the same way you give a wide berth to something that has been arranged to seem unthreatening while never quite losing the quality of a warning. They watched the ambulance, and they watched the bikers riding escort. And something happened. Not everywhere, not with everyone, but in enough of those watching faces, something turned. Because the story of a burning car on a mountain highway, and a woman who was supposed to disappear, and 200 bikers who stopped when everyone else would have driven past, that story was already moving. Sandra Vale's article had not been published yet, but the photograph taken by one of the convoy bikers the night before 200 headlights in formation around a guardrail in the dark had been shared more than 40,000 times before noon. People were looking at that photograph and feeling something they couldn't entirely name. Logan felt it too, riding behind that ambulance on a cold Montana afternoon. He felt it in the particular way the air moved through the convoy and the sound of a dozen engines that meant something different than engines usually mean, in the knowledge that behind him and around him were people who had chosen over and over in ways large and small to be the kind of people who showed up. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it at a red light. It was Bergstrom. Findings documented. Chain of custody complete. Agent Doyle has the preliminary report. The lines were cut, Logan. Both of them. This was not an accident. Logan read it twice. He put the phone away. He looked at the ambulance ahead of him. He thought about Claire's voice in the dark. He wanted us gone. He thought about a 4-year-old girl who never got the chance to be 5. He thought about what it meant to be the person who stopped when stopping was the harder thing. The light changed. The convoy moved. And 60 miles behind them, in the office of Valley Commerce Bank, Richard Anderson sat across from Marcus Grantham and listened to everything that was now in motion. And for the first time in 40 years, he could not see the path through. And in a county sheriff's department, a young deputy named Falk sat at his desk and read Bergstrom's preliminary findings, which Agent Doyle had very deliberately copied to the county sheriff's office as a professional courtesy. That was also a clear signal about who had jurisdiction now, and he sat with it for a long time. Then he walked down the hall to his sergeant's office. He knocked on the door. His Sergeant Briggs looked up. Falks put the document on the desk. "I think," Falks said carefully, "that you should see this." And Briggs looked at the document. And something in the room between them changed. Not resolved, not fixed, but changed. Because even in the places where power has been arranged for a long time in the favor of the wrong people, there is almost always one person who is waiting to be shown a clear enough reason to choose differently. And Falks had just given Briggs that reason. Whether Briggs would take it was another question entirely. But the question had been asked, and asking it was the beginning of everything. The question Falks had asked Briggs did not get answered that afternoon. Logan found out about it the next morning from a source he hadn't expected, Falks himself, who called the number Logan had left with the hospital nursing staff, apparently having tracked it down through channels that suggested the young deputy had more initiative than his position in the department might imply. "Mr. Whitaker," Falkus said. His voice was careful, the voice of someone making a call they've thought about for a while before dialing. "I want you to know that I showed Sergeant Briggs the preliminary forensics report yesterday afternoon." Logan waited. "He didn't say much," Falks continued. "He looked at it for a long time. He asked me where I got it. I told him it came through Agent Doyle's office, copied to the department as professional courtesy." A pause. "He told me to file it and that state investigators would handle it from here." "And," Logan said, "and this morning he called in sick," Falks said. "And I found out that Marcus Grantham was seen going into the county administration building at 7:45 this morning." Another pause longer. "I don't know what that means exactly, but I thought you should know." "I appreciate that," Logan said. "I genuinely do." "Mr. Whitaker," Falks's voice dropped lower, "I've been a deputy in this county for 3 years. I know how things work here. I know who the Anderson family is. I also know what it means when a car's brake lines are deliberately compromised and the driver is 8 months pregnant." He stopped. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone in this department is looking the other way." Logan held the phone for a moment after Falk said that, turning the weight of it over in his mind. Are you in a position to document what you've observed? He said carefully. The Grantham sighting, the sequence of events, your own actions in bringing the report to Briggs. I've already written it up, Falk said, dated and time-stamped. I made a copy and gave it to my brother-in-law to hold. Logan almost smiled. Good man, he said quietly. I just need to know, Falk said. The people working on Claire Anderson's side, are they solid? Is this going somewhere real, or is it going to hit a wall? The way things in this county always hit a wall. Agent Harriet Doyle, Logan said, is driving to Missoula today to review Bergstrom's full findings in person. Patricia Oakes filed a motion yesterday that names specific failures in the county law enforcement response as part of a federal civil rights complaint. Sandra Vale's article published this morning in the Billings Courier and has been picked up by 3 wire services. He paused. It is going somewhere real. I promise you that. Falks breathed out. Okay, he said. Okay. Keep your head down, Logan said. Keep documenting. And if anything happens that you think I need to know about anything, you call this number. I will, Falks said. He hung up. Logan set his phone on the table of the small conference room at St. Francis that Oakes had converted essentially into a command center. Around him were Decker, Cruz, Maya Manny on a laptop, and Oakes herself, who had arrived at 6 that morning in a charcoal blazer with a legal pad and an expression that said she had not slept and did not particularly require sleep. Grantham at County Administration at 7:45, Logan said. What's he doing there? Oakes didn't look up from her legal pad. Applying pressure to the county commissioners, she said. If he can get a commissioner to formally request that the state investigation be redirected back to county jurisdiction, it creates a procedural argument that slows Doyle's team down. She tapped her pen on the pad. It won't work, but it buys time. And buying time is what Marcus Grantham does better than almost anyone I've ever practiced against. How much time does he get? Cruz asked. Not much, Oakes said, because this morning the state attorney general's office called me. She looked up now, and Logan registered for the first time since meeting her that Patricia Oakes was not a woman who showed excitement, but that she was showing the closest thing to it right now. They've been watching the Banking Commission inquiry into Valley Commerce for 8 months. They have been waiting for something that creates a criminal nexus, something that connects the financial irregularities to an actual crime rather than just regulatory violations. Because regulatory violations get settlements. Crimes get prosecutions. The room was quiet. The attempted murder of Claire Anderson, Oakes said, is their criminal nexus. They've been handed it with forensic documentation on a weekend in November, and they are not inclined to let county political considerations slow them down. Manny looked up from his laptop. So the AG's office is moving. Their investigative team is coordinating with Doyle as of this morning, Oakes confirmed. This is no longer a county matter. It is no longer even purely a state matter. The banking angle potentially involves federal wire fraud statutes, which means the FBI field office in Billings, which I called yesterday and which has been watching Valley Commerce independently, is now formally in conversation with the AG. She paused. What started as a custody fight is now a multi-agency criminal investigation. Decker let out a long breath that wasn't quite a word. Cruz said, what does that mean for Claire right now, today? It means the custody application becomes almost impossible to pursue. Oakes said, no family court judge in Montana is going to grant emergency custody to a man who is the subject of a coordinated state and federal criminal investigation for the attempted murder of the child's mother. Grantham knows this, which is why he's at the county building right now, trying to create enough procedural noise to muddy the picture before it gets completely clear. Then we keep the picture clear, Logan said. We keep the picture clear, Oakes agreed. Sandra Vale's article had gone live at 6 that morning, and by the time Logan read the room update, it had been shared over 90,000 times. Logan had read the piece twice. It was exactly what it needed to be, precise, fair, and completely devastating. Vale had written it in the straightforward, evidence-first style of a reporter who understood that the facts laid plainly end-to-end were more damning than any rhetorical embellishment could make them. She quoted Claire directly at length. She quoted Logan. She quoted Bergstrom's preliminary findings. She quoted Oakes. She noted with careful specificity that Noah Anderson had been contacted for comment and had directed all inquiries to Marcus Grantham, and that Grantham had provided a statement calling the allegations deeply troubling mischaracterizations of a family in crisis. The statement from Grantham had Logan thought the quality of a man trying to sandbag a river with a bath towel. What Vale had also done, and this was the thing that set the piece apart from standard reporting, was contextualize. She had pulled 4 other cases from the past decade in the same county where domestic violence allegations had been made against individuals with family connections to establish local money, and she had traced the resolution of each one. Settlement, drop charges, recanting, settlement. The pattern was not stated explicitly. It was simply shown, which was Logan understood the more powerful version of the accusation. His phone had been buzzing since 6. People he knew from chapters across the country who had seen the photograph of the headlights on the highway. Other club presidents, veterans organizations with whom the Silver Ravens had done charity work for years. A domestic violence advocacy group based in Helena that had been trying to build exactly the kind of case profile Vale had constructed and had been unable to do it alone. A woman named Arlene who ran a shelter in Billings who called at 7:15 and said 6 words that Logan had been turning over in his mind ever since, "Tell me what you need from us." He had told her. She had listened. She had said she'd call back within an hour, and she had with 3 specific things she could provide. Legal advocate contacts, a survivor support network with 3 members who had dealt with Richard Anderson's sphere of influence directly, and a media contact at a national outlet who had been working on a story about rural domestic violence and institutional protection of abusers for almost a year. "His name is Garrett Marsh," Arlene said. "He's been trying to crack a case like this for months. He needs a case where the evidence is solid and the survivor is willing to speak." "Does Claire know his name?" "I'll ask her," Logan said. Claire, when he told her, was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Garrett Marsh. He wrote a piece 2 years ago about a case in Wyoming. I read it. I remember thinking." She stopped. "I remember thinking that I wish someone had written that piece about me." "Do you want him to?" Logan asked. She looked down at her daughter asleep in the unit beside her bed. They had named her. Claire had told Logan the night before quietly after her mother had arrived from Portland, and the room had finally emptied of the medical personnel and the legal conversations and the constant motion of people working on her behalf. The name was Eleanor June Anderson. Eleanor, for Claire's grandmother, whose inheritance had set this whole chain of events in motion, and whose love Claire said had been the one thing she'd held on to during the worst years. June because her daughter had been born in November, and Claire had decided she wanted her daughter to carry the name of a warm month as a reminder that warmth was always possible. The middle name, the one Logan had asked about in the ravine, the one that Claire had said she wanted to belong to someone who fought for her daughter before she knew she needed fighting for, was Grace. Eleanor Grace June Anderson. "Yes," Claire said. "Tell Garrett Marsh I'll talk to him. Tell him I want to." She looked up from her daughter. "I've been quiet for 4 years. I don't want to be quiet anymore." Logan called Arlene. Arlene called Marsh. And by noon, Garrett Marsh was on a flight from Chicago to Billings. The twist that none of them had anticipated arrived at 2:17 that afternoon. It came in the form of a phone call to Patricia Oakes from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer it. She told Logan later that something made her pick up some instinct that she couldn't name, the kind that 22 years of reading situations had built into her without her permission. The voice on the other end was a woman's. "Ms. Oakes," the woman said. "My name is Diane Harrell. I was the personal assistant to Richard Anderson for 11 years. I left his employment 8 months ago." A pause. "I've been following what's happened with Claire Anderson. I've been trying to decide whether to call for 2 days. Another pause. "I know something specific, something that I think changes the shape of what you're building." Oakes had put the call on speaker immediately and texted Logan to come to the conference room. By the time he arrived, she had already been talking to Diane Harrell for 4 minutes and had filled half a page of her legal pad. Diane Harrell was 61 years old. She had worked for Richard Anderson from the age of 44 to 55, a decade, and a year of managing his calendar, his correspondence, his private communications, in the particular category of tasks that a man like Richard Anderson needed someone absolutely trustworthy to handle, which meant tasks that were not written in emails and not discussed on phones, and not referenced in any documentation that might later be reviewed. She had left 8 months ago. She had left because of something she had seen, something she had been sitting with for 8 months, weighing it against the NDA she had signed upon departure, weighing it against the settlement statement she had received, weighing it against the very clear understanding she had of what the Anderson family did to people who talked. What she had seen was a meeting. 14 months ago, 1 month after Claire's grandmother died, 1 month after the inheritance became real, Richard Anderson had a private meeting in his office. Diane had not been asked to schedule it, which was itself unusual. The man who attended was not introduced to her and did not sign in. But Diane, whose job had made her very good at noticing things she was not supposed to notice, had seen the visitor clearly, had later identified him from a photograph, and knew him as a man with a specific set of professional skills that were available for the right price to people who needed work done that couldn't be traced to them directly. The man's name was Curtis Peel. He had a record, a particular kind of record, not violence, not drugs, but mechanical fraud. Insurance fraud specifically connected to staged vehicle accidents. He had served time in Nevada 11 years ago and had apparently rebuilt a quieter version of his career since then. I didn't understand what the meeting was about when it happened, Diane said. I had suspicions, but suspicions aren't evidence, and I had signed documents saying I wouldn't speak about things I'd observed in the course of my employment, and I was afraid. Her voice was steady, but carried the particular weight of someone who has been afraid for a long time and has decided to put the weight down. When I read this morning about the brake lines, about what the forensics found, I understood what the meeting had been. And I understood that I had been sitting on information that could have prevented what happened to that woman. Oakes was writing without stopping. Ms. Harrell, are you willing to provide a formal statement? I'm calling you because I'm willing to provide a formal statement, Diane said. I'm calling you because I've spent 8 months telling myself the NDA meant I couldn't speak, and this morning I called a lawyer, and my lawyer told me that an NDA does not legally prevent disclosure of information related to criminal activity. She stopped. I should have called a lawyer 8 months ago. What you're doing right now is what matters, Oakes said. I need to connect you with Agent Doyle at the Montana Department of Justice. Will you speak with her? Yes, Diane said. I have the date of the meeting. I have the time. I have a description of the man. And she paused. I have a photograph. I kept a photograph. I know I wasn't supposed to. I kept it because some part of me knew that someday I might need it, and I couldn't quite make myself not have it. Oakes looked at Logan across the table. Logan looked back at her. Ms. Harrell, Oakes said carefully, can you stay on the line while I get Agent Doyle on a 3-way call? I can stay on the line as long as you need, Diane said. Agent Doyle was on within 6 minutes. The 3-way call lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, the room was completely quiet. Then Cruz said, she has a photograph of the man Richard Anderson hired to sabotage the vehicle. A photograph placing him in Richard Anderson's office 1 month after the inheritance became real and 10 months before the crash, Oakes confirmed. That's premeditation, Decker said. That's conspiracy to commit murder, Oakes said. That's Richard Anderson's direct involvement, not just Noah's. She closed her legal pad. Agent Doyle is contacting the FBI field office in Billings right now. This has gone from state criminal investigation to federal. Conspiracy charges cross state lines. If Peel was contracted across state lines, and given his Nevada history, that is likely. Logan stood up and walked to the window, not to see anything, just to move. Just to let the full weight of it move through his body rather than sitting in it. Richard Anderson, not just Noah, the father, the architect, the man who had spent 40 years being the most important person in every room he entered, had sat across his own desk from a man with a particular skill set and had made a particular arrangement and had done it 1 month after learning that the woman his son had married stood to inherit several $1 million. He thought about Claire's voice. He wanted us gone. She had said he, not they, not his family. She had said he, meaning Noah, because Noah was the face she lived with, the face she had been afraid of, the face that had looked at her differently after finding out about the will. But behind Noah this whole time had been Richard. Logan. It was Maya, and her voice had a quality he recognized as controlled urgency. Noah Anderson's legal team just filed a motion in family court. They were asking for an emergency hearing on the custody application. Today, they wanted heard today. Logan turned back from the window. Today, within the hour, Maya said. They filed it 30 minutes ago. Oaks was already on her phone. She was moving fast, her voice sharp and clipped, in the way it got when the situation required maximum precision. She was calling the family court clerk. She was calling the presiding judge's office directly. She was saying words like active federal criminal investigation and conflict of interest in emergency stay pending federal coordination with the fluency of a woman who had done this before, who knew exactly which words stopped which processes. Logan watched her and thought they know. Noah knew. Grantham knew. They had heard something from their county contacts, from their administrative relationships, from some channel. They still had open, despite everything, and they understood that the window was closing, that the charges were coming, that the thing they had tried to do to Claire was about to be proven, formally and completely, in ways that could not be managed or settled or redirected. And so they were trying to grab the one remaining piece before the window shut. Eleanor Grace, June Anderson, 18 hours old. If they got a temporary custody order before the federal charges were formally filed, the order would have legal standing that would complicate removal even in the face of a criminal case. It would create a procedural tangle that could take weeks or months to resolve. During those weeks or months, Noah would have physical access to Claire's daughter. Physical access that could be used as leverage. Physical access that a man with nothing left to lose might use in ways that had nothing to do with the law. Logan was moving before Oaks finished her call. He went down the corridor to Claire's room. She was already sitting up. I saw Maya's face when she came past, Claire said. What's happening? He told her. He watched the fear move through her, not performed, not managed, just real and immediate. And then he watched her do what he had watched her do over and over in the past 24 hours. He watched her take the fear, look at it directly, and refuse to let it make the decision. Can Oaks stop the hearing? She asked. She's working on it right now, Logan said. But Claire, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think clearly. She met his eyes. Is there anything, he said, anything at all in your history, your medical records, anything Noah or his family could put in front of a judge today that could be used to make a credibility argument against you, not the truth, what they could allege? She breathed. I had a therapist for 2 years during the marriage. Noah chose her. I understand now that she wasn't objective. I have reason to believe she reported things back to him. She paused. Her notes might characterize some of my perceptions as anxious distortion. That was the language she used, anxious distortion. For things I now understand were completely accurate observations about what was happening to me. Is she still practicing? Yes. Oaks needs to know this, Logan said. Right now. Claire picked up her phone and called Oaks directly. Logan stepped back into the corridor and had called Decker. I need bodies at this hospital, he said. Not aggressive, not confrontational. I need silver ravens visible in and around this building, and I need it to look exactly like what it is people who are here because someone important to them is here and they're not leaving. How many? Decker asked. As many as can get here in the next hour, Logan said. Decker made 3 calls. Within 40 minutes, 31 bikers were in and around St. Francis Medical Center, in the waiting rooms, in the corridors, in the parking lot. Not blocking, not threatening, simply present. The way people are present when they mean it. The nursing staff, to their credit, asked no one to leave. One nurse who had a Silver Ravens bumper sticker on her car from a charity event 2 years earlier brought a tray of coffee to the waiting room without being asked and said simply, "We know why you're here." The emergency custody hearing was scheduled before Judge Patricia Annan in family court at 4 that afternoon. Oaks appeared via video. Marcus Grantham appeared in person with Noah at his side. And what happened in that courtroom in the next 50 minutes was Logan heard secondhand from Oaks in a phone call that evening, one of the cleaner examples of careful legal work landing at exactly the right moment. Oaks had 5 things in front of Judge Annan. She had Bergstrom's documented forensics findings showing deliberate vehicle tampering. She had the chain of custody documentation confirming evidentiary integrity. She had Agent Doyle's written confirmation that the Montana Department of Justice had an active criminal investigation into Noah Anderson for conspiracy to commit murder. She had the FBI field office's formal acknowledgement that they were coordinating with the state investigation on potential federal charges. And she had newly obtained in the past 2 hours, through a direct call to the State Medical Licensing Board, a formal complaint that had been filed against Claire's therapist 2 years ago by a different patient, a complaint that alleged the therapist had disclosed confidential information to the patient's spouse. The complaint had been settled quietly. The settlement was on record. The pattern, Oakes had told Logan, of this family using professional relationships to manage information, it goes through everything. The therapist, the hospital administrator, the county sheriff. Richard Anderson built a system, and every piece of that system is now visible. Judge Annan had heard Grantham out completely. She had asked him 3 specific questions about the forensics findings and his response to them. She had listened to his answer about Claire's credibility and the therapist's characterizations. And then she had done something that Oakes said she would remember for a long time. She had looked at Noah Anderson directly and asked him one question. "Mr. Anderson," Judge Annan had said, "your wife is recovering from a near-fatal accident that state investigators now believe was deliberately caused. She gave birth 18 hours ago. Are you asking this court to remove a newborn from her mother on the basis of mental health characterizations generated within a professional relationship that is now itself under investigation?" Noah Anderson had looked at Grantham. Grantham had cleared his throat. Judge Annan had said, "I'll take that as a yes. Motion denied. Emergency custody application dismissed without prejudice. I'm also issuing a temporary protective order barring Noah Anderson from any contact with Claire Anderson or the minor child pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Mr. Grantham, you will want to advise your client that any further attempts to use this court as a pressure mechanism against an active state in federal criminal investigation will be treated as contempt." Noah Anderson had walked out of that courtroom without speaking. Grantham had gathered his papers with the careful efficiency of a man who is lost but intends to keep going. And in a hospital room in St. Francis, when Oakes relayed the outcome to Claire, what happened was very simple. Claire Anderson closed her eyes. She pressed both hands to her face. Her shoulders shook once, twice the particular shaking of something that has been held rigid for a very long time, releasing its tension all at once. Then she lowered her hands, looked at her daughter, and said in a voice that was entirely even, "Okay, what's next?" It was Decker who called Logan from the parking lot outside St. Francis that evening. "You need to see something," Decker said. Logan came outside. What he saw was the photograph on Decker's phone, a photograph someone had taken from a building across the street and posted publicly, which had been shared 40,000 times in the past 2 hours. The photograph showed the front entrance of St. Francis Medical Center. It showed 31 motorcycles in the parking lot. It showed the bikers, men and women, most in silver Ravens vests, some in the vests of other clubs, who had heard and come gathered in the kind of loose, natural way that people gather when they're not performing anything, just present. It showed the light from the hospital entrance falling across the pavement, and in the lower left corner of the frame, almost incidental, barely visible, a small window on the second floor warmly lit from inside, and in it, the silhouette of a woman holding a baby. The caption someone had written under it was 4 words, "Nobody gets left behind." Logan looked at the photograph for a long time. Decker said nothing. Below in the comment thread, there were thousands of responses. People who had their own stories. People who had been in their own ravines. People who had called for help and had it come. And people who had called and had it not come. And people who were not sure yet whether anyone was listening. People thanking strangers. People saying they hadn't thought this kind of thing was possible anymore. And people asking, "Who are the Silver Ravens? What do we tell them?" Decker asked. Logan handed the phone back. "We tell them the truth," he said. "We tell them we're people who stopped on a road one night because stopping was the right thing to do." He went back inside. At 8 that evening, Richard Anderson's lawyer, not Grantham, a different attorney whose firm operated out of Helena and specialized in federal criminal defense, issued a terse statement saying that Richard Anderson was cooperating fully with all relevant investigations and had no comment on recent media reporting. The statement was 3 sentences long and contained no denial of any specific allegation. 3 sentences. Logan read them and understood what they meant. A man who is not guilty makes specific denials. A man who is preparing to negotiate makes statements about cooperation. At 9:47 that evening, Logan sat in the corridor outside Claire's room. She had finally fallen asleep, her mother in the chair beside her, Eleanor Grace breathing steadily in her unit, And he thought about all of it, the way it had moved, the way things that seemed impossibly entrenched had begun to come apart under the pressure of documentation of people willing to speak of forces converging from enough directions that even a man with 40 years of practice management couldn't redirect them all. He thought about Diane Harrell, who had kept a photograph for 8 months because she couldn't quite make herself not have it. He thought about Falks, who had put a document on his sergeant's desk because one clear reason to choose differently was enough. He thought about Sandra Vale, who had spent 2 years trying to write a story with an ending worth telling and had finally found one. He thought about Arlene and Bergstrom and Patricia Oakes and Garrett Marsh, somewhere on a flight from Chicago, and 31 bikers in a parking lot who had come because Decker had made 3 phone calls and the people on the other end had said yes without asking how long it would take. He thought about a 4-year-old girl named after no one yet because she never got old enough to be named after. He thought this is what it looks like when people refuse to let it be the way it has always been. His phone rang. It was Manny. "Logan?" Manny's voice had the particular quality of controlled excitement that meant something important had just arrived. "Curtis Peel, the man from the photograph. Agent Doyle's team ran the photograph through their database and identified him 40 minutes ago." Logan sat up straighter. "He was picked up this evening in Billings," Manny said. "Routine traffic stop. But when they ran his name against the active federal flag that Doyle's office had placed, he was detained for questioning." A pause. "Logan, he had a burner phone, and on the burner phone was a deleted text exchange that their tech team recovered in less than an hour." "With who?" Logan said. "The number traces to a prepaid purchased in Richard Anderson's county," Manny said. "The messages are from 11 months ago. They discuss in language that is careful, but not careful enough, the details of a service to be provided a vehicle, a route, a timing window, and a payment." The corridor was very quiet. "Manny," Logan said. "Yeah." "That's it," Logan said. "That's the case." "That's the case," Manny confirmed. "Doyle's team is moving tonight. I'm hearing through the contact at the AG's office that arrest warrants are being prepared. Both of them, Noah and Richard." Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Does Claire know?" "Not yet," Manny said. "I called you first." Logan stood up. He walked to the door of Claire's room. He looked through the small window. She was asleep. Her mother was asleep in the chair. Eleanor Grace was asleep in her unit, breathing with the steady, determined rhythm that Logan had come to think of as the most important sound in the building. He decided not to wake her. Some news is better received after sleep, when the body has had enough rest to hold it properly. The bad news she had been carrying for years she had received that exhausted, terrified in the dark. He wanted her to receive this news rested, alert, fully present for it. He sat back down in the corridor chair. He was still there at midnight. He was still there at 1 a.m. At 1:47, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. Then Manny texted the same information 4 seconds later, confirming it. "Noah Anderson arrested at his residence 1:32 a.m. Richard Anderson arrested at his residence 1:38 a.m. Federal charges include conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, bank fraud, and obstruction of justice." Logan read it twice. He set his phone face down on his knee. He sat in the corridor of St. Francis Medical Center in the middle of a Montana night in his road-worn leather vest with the silver Ravens patch on the back, with cuts on his hands from broken glass in a ravine, and he breathed. In the room behind him, Eleanor Grace Anderson slept. She did not know yet what the world had done for her in the hours since she arrived in it. She did not know about brake lines or forensics or federal warrants or 31 motorcycles in a parking lot, or she photographed shared 40,000 times, or a woman named Diane who kept a photograph because she couldn't make herself not have it. She did not know about any of it. She just breathed. And that, Logan thought, was exactly enough. He would let Claire sleep another 2 hours, and then he would go in. And he would tell her, Logan told her at 4 a.m. He hadn't planned to do it that early. He had told himself 2 hours let her sleep 2 more hours, but at 3:58, Claire's light came on under her door, visible in the gap at the floor, and 30 seconds later the door opened, and she stood in the frame with Eleanor Grace in her arms, in the particular alertness of a woman whose body had spent 4 years training itself to wake at the first signal that something had changed. She looked at Logan sitting in the corridor chair. She looked at his face. "Tell me," she said. He told her. He watched her face as he said the words arrested federal charges, conspiracy both of them, and what moved across her was not the explosion of relief he might have expected. It was something quieter and more complicated than that, something that looked at first almost like grief, as if the years she had spent being afraid of these men had become such a permanent architecture inside her that the news of their arrest felt for one disorienting moment like losing a structure she had organized herself around for so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to not have it. Then her daughter made a sound, small, complete the sound of a person who exists and intends to keep existing. And something in Claire's face broke open and remade itself into something Logan had not seen on her before. Not relief, not triumph, something older than both of those things. She sat down on the edge of the chair beside him. She held Eleanor Grace against her chest. She pressed her face into her daughter's hair, and she made no sound at all, and Logan sat beside her and said nothing because some moments are not for words. After a while, she lifted her head. "My mother is asleep in there," she said. "I know. She flew from Portland." Her voice was steady. "She hadn't seen me in 14 months. Noah kept finding reasons her flight conflicted with something the timing wasn't right. He thought I needed rest instead of visitors." She paused. I let him keep her away from me for over a year, and I told myself it was temporary and that I was handling it and that I would explain everything to her later when things were better. She looked at Eleanor Grace. "She landed yesterday morning, and I watched her walk through the door, and she saw me in the hospital bed, and she didn't say anything. She just took my hand, and I realized that was the first time anyone had taken my hand without needing something from me in 4 years." Logan was quiet. "Except you," Claire added, "in the ravine." He didn't answer that. She didn't need him to. They sat in the corridor together while the hospital breathed around them. The quiet mechanical breathing of a building doing its work in the middle of the night, and Logan thought about what comes after. Not the legal proceedings, not the next 48 hours of coordination with Oakes and Boyle and the federal prosecutors who were now the ones driving the timeline. He thought about the larger after, the one that didn't have a docket number. "What are you going to do?" he asked. She considered it, not a quick answer, a real one. "I'm going to stay in Montana," she said, which surprised him slightly. "I thought about leaving. Before all of this, when I was building the file and trying to figure out what my options were, I thought about Portland or Seattle or somewhere entirely new, somewhere without the Anderson name on half the buildings." She paused. "But Eleanor is a Montana baby. She was born here, and I don't want to spend her whole life teaching her that when something is hard, you go somewhere else." She looked at Logan steadily. "I want to teach her that sometimes you stay, and you build, and you make the place into something better than it was when you got there." Logan nodded slowly. "Besides," Claire said with the first thing that approached a genuine smile he'd seen from her, "I have good people here now." He didn't argue with that. At 6 in the morning, her mother, a small, composed woman named Helen, who had the quality of someone who has survived considerable difficulty without losing her fundamental warmth, woke up and found the two of them sitting in the corridor and brought them both terrible hospital coffee without comment, which was Logan thought one of the more generous acts he'd witnessed in recent memory. Helen sat in the third chair and looked at her daughter holding her granddaughter and said, "She has your grandmother's nose." "I know," Claire said. "Eleanor would have loved her completely." "I know that too." Helen reached over and touched Claire's arm. Nothing elaborate, just a touch, the kind that says I'm here in the most basic possible register. Logan excused himself to give them the corridor. He went downstairs and stood outside in the cold Montana morning and called Decker. "Both of them are in federal custody," Logan said. "It's done." Decker was quiet for a moment. "Then how are you talking, son?" "I'm fine," Logan said. "Logan, I'm better than fine," Logan said. And he meant it, and Decker knew what he meant, and neither of them needed to say anything more specific than that. "The chapter wants to know what's next," Decker said. "A lot of the guys who came down, they want to know if there's anything else needed." "Tell them thank you," Logan said. "Tell them they can go home. Tell them they did exactly what needed doing." He paused. "And tell Manny I said the same." "He'll say he was just doing research," Decker said. "He was doing a lot more than research," Logan said. After he hung up, he stood there for a few minutes with the cold on his face, thinking about nothing specific, just letting the past 36 hours settle into some kind of shape he could carry. He had not slept. He was aware of this the way you become aware of something that has been true for a while and hasn't bothered you enough to address it distantly without urgency. The cuts on his hands ached steadily. His back ached from the corridor chair. He was 53 years old, and he had spent the night in a hospital hallway, and he felt in some way that went past the physical completely right about it. His phone buzzed. Sandra Vale. He answered it. "The arrests are public," she said without preamble. "The AG's office issued a press release at 5:45. I have a follow-up piece running this afternoon. I wanted to ask you for the record what you want people to know. About why you stopped. About what these past 2 days have been." Logan thought about it. "Write what you saw," he said. "Write what Claire told you. Write what Bergstrom found, and what Diane Harrell did, and what Falks did, and what Oakes did." He paused. "All I did was hear someone in the dark. The rest of it was a lot of people deciding that hearing someone isn't enough, that you have to actually move." Vale was quiet for a moment. "Can I quote that?" "You can quote anything I've said to you," Logan said. After he hung up, he went back inside. The first of the things he hadn't anticipated came at 8:30 that morning, when Patricia Oakes called with a development that none of them had discussed because none of them had thought it was relevant yet. "Curtis Peel took a deal," Oakes said. Logan straightened. "Already. Federal prosecutors offered him a reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation and testimony," Oakes said. "He accepted within 2 hours of his detention, which tells you everything you need to know about how confident he was in the Anderson family's ability to protect him once they were under arrest themselves." She paused. "His testimony includes the full account of his meeting with Richard Anderson. It includes the specific instructions he received, the amount he was paid, the method he used on the vehicle, and a second meeting that took place 3 weeks before the crash to confirm the timeline." Logan processed this. A second meeting. 3 weeks before the crash, Oakes confirmed, which means this was not an impulsive decision. This was not a moment of desperation. This was planned, confirmed, and executed over a period of months. The prosecutors are now looking at a first-degree conspiracy charge in addition to everything else. "Does Claire know?" "I'm calling her next," Oakes said. "I wanted you to know first." He wasn't sure why that mattered to Oakes, why she had made the choice to call him before Claire's own attorney called Claire, but he thought he understood it. Oakes had been in this work for a long time. She knew what it meant when the people around a survivor were solid, and she treated those people accordingly. "Patricia," Logan said, "thank you for everything you've done in the past 2 days." "Don't thank me yet," Oakes said. "There are still proceedings, still a trial or multiple trials. Still months of this." She paused. "But thank you for getting it moving. Without the forensics and the financial documentation and the pressure you applied, this case doesn't get to federal prosecutors in 48 hours. It gets buried in a county filing system and reviewed in 6 months with someone who owes Richard Anderson a favor." "It wouldn't have gotten anywhere without Diane Harrell," Logan said. "No," Oakes agreed, "it wouldn't have." She was quiet a moment. "That's the thing about these situations. The piece that breaks it open is never the piece you plan for. It's always the person you didn't know was watching." Logan thought about that for a long time after the call ended. The second thing he hadn't anticipated arrived 2 days later in the form of a phone call from a number with an area code he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail. He answered it instead. "Mr. Whitaker." The voice was a woman's, older, careful, with the particular precision of someone who has thought very clearly about what they want to say before saying it. "My name is Ruth Calloway. I'm calling from Spokane, Washington. I saw the article about what happened in Montana, about Claire Anderson and your organization." A pause. "I want to tell you something. 2 years ago, my daughter was in a situation that had some similarities to what I've been reading about. She tried to get help. She tried to find people who would listen. She went to the police in the county where she lived, and the police were not helpful." Another pause, this one heavier. "My daughter didn't survive." Logan closed his eyes. "I'm not calling to tell you a sad story," Ruth Calloway said, and her voice was firm in the way that people's voices get when they have spent a long time deciding not to be defined by the saddest thing that happened to them. "I'm calling because what you did, what your people did, it's what needed to happen for my daughter and didn't. And I want to know if there's a way for me to help make sure it happens for more people, however I can, whatever that looks like. Logan sat with him for a moment. Ms. Calloway, he said, what's your background? What kind of work do you do? I was a social worker for 31 years, she said. I specialize in crisis intervention and domestic violence case management. I retired 8 months ago. Logan thought about Arlene in Billings. He thought about the women who had contacted the Silver Ravens through their social media channels in the past 2 days. The volume of messages that Maya had been quietly cataloging, message after message, from people who had seen the photograph of the headlights on the highway and had understood it as something that applied to them. He thought about what Claire had said, I want to make the place into something better than it was when you got there. Miss Calloway, he said, I'd like you to talk to some people. Can I have a colleague of mine call you this week? That's exactly why I called, she said. He gave her Maya's number. Maya, when he explained the call, said nothing for a moment. Then she said, Logan, how many messages do you think we've gotten in the past 2 days from people like Ruth Calloway? I don't know, he said. How many? 412, Maya said. As of this morning, and they're still coming. He had known something was building. He had felt it in the way the photograph spread, in the way the comments accumulated, in the way Arlene's call had come so quickly and been so specific about what she could provide. He had understood abstractly that the story had reached people. But 412 people who had seen something in the headlights on the highway and recognized it as something that spoke to their own experience, that was not abstract. That was a number with real weight. What are you thinking when he asked Maya? I'm thinking, she said carefully, that we've been doing informal versions of this for years. Helping people, stopping when we shouldn't just drive past. And I'm thinking that 412 people in 2 days is telling us that there is a need here that is larger than anything we've been trying to address informally. She paused. I'm thinking we should make it formal. The twist that came 3 weeks later was the one nobody in the story had been prepared for. And it came not from the legal proceedings, which were moving exactly as Oakes had predicted, with the systematic efficiency of a federal case with multiple cooperating witnesses and a forensics record that was essentially airtight, but from Marcus Grantham. Grantham had been silent since the arrests. Publicly silent, professionally silent, the silence of a man reassessing the landscape and determining which direction to move. Logan had thought about Grantham periodically the way you think about a piece of a situation that hasn't resolved yet. Grantham called Oakes directly. He asked for a meeting. Oakes called Logan before she agreed to anything. He wants to talk, she said. He didn't say about what specifically. He used the phrase context that may be useful, which in my experience means he has information he's been sitting on and has decided that sitting on it is now more dangerous than releasing it. What does he want in return? Logan asked. He hasn't said yet, Oakes said. But Marcus Grantham doesn't make calls like this without knowing exactly what he wants. He just wants to establish the meeting first to see if the other side is willing to be in the room before he names his terms. Are you willing to be in the room? Logan asked. I'm willing to listen to anything that helps Claire, Oakes said. That's the only standard I'm applying. The meeting happened 4 days later. Logan was not in it. It was Oakes, the federal prosecutor assigned to the case, and Agent Doyle on one side, Grantham alone on the other. No Noah, no Richard, just Grantham, who had spent 15 years carrying the legal weight of everything the Anderson family had needed carried, and who had apparently decided at some point in the past 3 weeks that he had carried enough. What Grantham provided was a set of records, internal communications between himself, Richard Anderson, and Noah Anderson going back 6 years. Not current communications, not recent, but a record of a pattern that had begun long before Claire entered the picture. 3 other situations where Richard Anderson had used legal and financial mechanisms to manage women who had become inconvenient to the family's interests. 3 situations that had each resolved quietly through processes that looked like unfortunate coincidences or private settlements, but that Grantham's records revealed had been actively engineered. None of the 3 women had died, but all 3 of them had been pushed out, silenced, financially damaged, or publicly discredited through a campaign that bore, Oakes told Logan afterward, an unmistakable structural similarity to what had been done to Claire, with the crucial difference that Claire had made it to 8 months of pregnancy before the final move was made, and that final move had failed because of a frozen Montana highway in a motorcycle convoy that stopped when it should have driven past. He's not getting immunity, Oakes said flatly. He knew about some of this while it was happening. But what he's given us expands the case significantly. It establishes Richard Anderson as a serial architect of this kind of thing, not a one-time participant in his son's desperation. That changes the sentencing landscape completely. And the three other women? Logan asked immediately. Oakes paused. The prosecutors are reaching out to them. Whether they want to be a part of the case is entirely their choice, but they're being contacted. Logan thought about Ruth Calloway in Spokane. He thought about her daughter who hadn't survived. He thought about the particular cruelty of a pattern that had been running for years in plain sight of a lawyer who had kept the records and said nothing until it was safe to say something. He thought about how many claws there might have been if the pattern had been interrupted earlier. He didn't say any of that to Oakes. He didn't need to. She was already thinking it. 6 weeks after the night on the highway, Claire Anderson gave her first public interview. Not with Sandra Vale, that relationship remained important, and Vale had covered the story with consistent fairness, but with Garrett Marsh, whose piece for the national outlet ran as a long-form narrative that took readers from a burning car in a Montana ravine through a hospital corridor and a courtroom and a parking lot full of motorcycles and into the larger architecture of what had been done to her and why and how it had been stopped. Logan read it twice. Marsh was an excellent writer. He had the particular skill of someone who understood that the human emotional truth of a story and the factual precision of a story were not in competition with each other, that in fact they reinforced each other, that the most powerful journalism was the kind where you couldn't separate the feeling from the fact because they were woven from the same thread. He had written about Claire with complete accuracy and complete respect. He had written about Logan without making him into anything larger than he was, which Logan appreciated more than he would have been able to articulate. He had written about Diane Harrell and Falks and Bergstrom and Oakes and Sandra Vale and Maya and Decker and Manny and Arlene and Ruth Calloway. He had found Ruth Calloway through the Advocacy Network and had spoken with her for 3 hours and had woven her story through Claire's in a way that made clear what Claire's survival meant in a world where the same story had ended differently for someone else. The piece ran on a Thursday morning. By Thursday evening, it had been read more than 2 million times. By Friday morning, the Silver Ravens' new outreach program, which Maya had been building quietly for 6 weeks with input from Ruth Calloway and Arlene and 3 other domestic violence advocates, and Patricia Oakes and, surprisingly, Dr. Rice, who had asked to be involved, had received over 3,000 inquiries from people across 27 states. Maya called it the Highway Network. The name was Claire's suggestion. Because a highway is a place where you can be going anywhere, Claire had said when Maya asked her about it. And it's a place where you can be completely alone in the middle of the night when something goes wrong. And it's a place where someone can stop. The formal launch of the Highway Network happened on a Saturday in March, which Logan had not planned and had not organized and had not expected to become what it became. He had expected a small gathering. The Silver Ravens chapter, the advocacy partners Claire and her mother and Eleanor Grace Oakes, maybe Marsh. He had expected something functional and low-key, the kind of thing that organizations do when they want to mark a beginning without being theatrical about it. What happened instead was that word had spread in the way things spread now, quickly and without boundaries. And when Logan arrived at the community center that Maya had rented for the occasion, he found a parking lot that was full and a room inside that was standing room and a gathering of people that included not just Silver Ravens, but members of 7 other motorcycle clubs from 4 states, 24 domestic violence advocates from across the region, 3 journalists, including Sandra Vale, Agent Doyle, Patricia Oakes Falks, who was not in uniform and had come on his own time, which said everything Dr. Rice Bergstrom, and in the back corner, standing quietly and not drawing attention, Diane Harrell. Logan hadn't known Diane was coming. He didn't know she was there until Maya pointed her out. He crossed the room and extended his hand. She shook it. She was a small woman who carried herself with the particular straight-back composure of someone who has made peace with a difficult decision and accepted its weight. "I wasn't sure I should come," she said. "I'm glad you did," Logan said. "I kept thinking," she stopped. "I kept thinking that if I had called someone sooner, if I had found someone to call, 8 months I sat with that photograph. 8 months. Her jaw tightened. "I'll think about those 8 months for a long time." "You called when you called," Logan said, "and it was enough." She looked at him. "Was it?" He held her gaze. Claire is here, he said. Eleanor Grace is here. The case is solid. The two other women who agreed to participate are getting their day in court. And what you gave us is what made it real, not just a crash that might have been an accident, but a pattern that can't be denied. He paused. 8 months ago, you didn't have anyone to call. Now there's something to call. That's partly because of you. Diane Harrell looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away and she did not cry, but her breath had the quality of someone processing something large that they are choosing deliberately to set down. Thank you, she said. He gave her the seat at the end of the front row. Claire spoke last. She had not prepared a speech. Logan knew this because she had told him so 2 days earlier when he'd asked if she needed anything. I don't want to prepare something, she'd said. I don't want to perform this. I just want to say what's true. She stood in front of a room full of strangers who were not strangers anymore. She had Eleanor Grace in her arms. Eleanor Grace was 6 weeks old and was by all medical accounts completely healthy. The small size that had worried the neonatal team at birth had resolved with the particular determination that Logan had come to associate with everything about this child, as if Eleanor Grace had understood from the beginning that she had arrived in complicated circumstances and had decided to be robust about it. Claire looked at the room. She said, 4 years ago, I married a man who spent every day of those 4 years convincing me that I was the problem, that my instincts were wrong, that my perceptions were distorted, that the people who might have helped me were not people I should trust. She paused. He was very good at it, and I was a smart woman. I want you to understand that. I am a smart woman who was systematically taught to distrust her own mind. That is not a weakness. That is what this kind of harm does. It is its whole purpose. The room was completely still. I also want you to understand, she said, that the night I went over that guardrail, I was not rescued because I was special. I was not rescued because my case was more sympathetic or more deserving than anyone else's. I was rescued because 47 motorcycles happened to be on that highway at that moment, and because the man riding point happened to have 30 years of road instinct and a particular kind of character, and because 200 people had spent their lives being told they were the problem and had decided a long time ago to prove something different. Her voice was steady. I was rescued because people stopped. She shifted Eleanor Grace in her arms. The highway network exists, she said, because stopping cannot be accidental. It cannot depend on 47 motorcycles being on the right highway at the right time. It has to be built. It has to be a system. It has to be the kind of thing where there is always someone to call, always someone who knows what to do with the call, always someone who will move. She looked at Logan briefly directly. I am here because someone moved. Eleanor Grace is here because someone moved. And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure that when the next person cries out in the dark, there is something already in motion to receive that cry. She sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Then it was not quiet at all. Afterward, when the formal part had ended and the room had broken into the particular warm disorder of people with shared purpose finding each other, Logan sat in a chair along the wall and watched it happen. He watched Ruth Calloway speak with two women he didn't recognize, all three of them, in the particular close posture of people sharing something specific and important. He watched Falks talk with Arlene, who was taking notes on her phone with the focused efficiency of someone who has found a useful ally. He watched Bergstrom shake hands with Agent Doyle and then stand beside her while she made a phone call, the two of them comfortable in the silence between them, in the way of people who have worked a high-stakes situation together and come through it with mutual respect. He watched Maya move through the room with the contained energy of a person running multiple processes simultaneously, which she was the highway network's operational framework, was in her head and in her phone, and in 3 documents that Manny had built into a system that could be accessed and updated in real time. And she was already connecting people to specific roles within it with the efficiency of someone who had been planning this quietly for 6 weeks and was now finally executing. He watched Diane Harrell speak with Claire. He couldn't hear what they said. He didn't try to. He watched Claire listen, and he watched Diane speak, and he watched the particular transfer of something between them. Not absolution, because Diane's 8 months of silence was hers to reckon with and not Claire's to forgive on behalf of the world. But something, an acknowledgement, A recognition that the things people carry in private, in the moment they choose to put them down, and what they put them down, for these things have weight and consequence and meaning. He watched Claire reach out and put her hand on Diane's arm, the same brief, complete gesture her mother had made in the hospital corridor, the gesture that said, "I'm here in the most basic register." Diane Harrell's composure held, but just barely. Decker appeared and sat down in the chair beside Logan. "Good day," Decker said. "Yes," Logan said. "You look like a man who's thinking about something." "I'm thinking about a lot of things." Decker was quiet a moment. "Then you did the right thing on that highway." "I heard a person in the dark," Logan said. "That's not heroism. That's just having functioning ears." "Logan," Decker's voice carried the particular weight of someone who has known you long enough to say the thing without preamble. "She named her daughter Grace. You know why she chose that name. Don't do the thing where you minimize what that means, because it makes you uncomfortable to accept it." Logan looked at him. Decker looked back completely unimpressed by whatever expression Logan had produced. "Okay," Logan said. "Okay," Decker said. They sat together in comfortable silence while the room moved around them. At some point, Eleanor or Grace, who had been making her general contentment known to no one in particular from her position in the crook of her grandmother Helen's arm across the room, produced a sound that was not contentment, a sound that was specific and communicative and impossible to ignore. And Helen brought her to Claire, and Claire took her and settled her, and the sound stopped. And Claire looked up from her daughter and across the room and found Logan's eyes, and she held them for a moment, and she nodded once, and he nodded back, and that was its own complete conversation. He thought about the highway. He thought about 46 bikes in formation behind him, and the smell of burning and the foam and the drop below the guardrail, and the 35 feet of dark slope, and the broken glass, and a hand that grabbed his wrist and held on. He thought about a 4-year-old girl who had the rest of her life ahead of her. He thought about what it meant to stop, not the decision to stop. The decision was simple, had always been simple, was the kind of decision that becomes automatic once you understand clearly enough what you stand for. But the act of stopping, the physical, irreversible commitment of it, the moment you put your kickstand down and swing your leg off and walk toward the guardrail instead of the road ahead. Everything he had come to believe lived in that moment. Not in the heroism that came after, if it came, not in the outcome which you could not control, but in the moment of choosing to stop when stopping cost you something: time, comfort, safety, the warm forward momentum of a life that was already moving. That moment was the one that mattered. He had made that choice on a frozen Montana highway in November. He had made it before, not always well, not always right, but always genuinely with whatever he had at the time. He had made it the day he walked into the county courthouse after his daughter died and started the process of holding the drunk driver accountable through every channel available to him, even the ones that failed. He had made it the day he told the Silver Ravens that they would use their visibility and their resources not to intimidate, but to protect. He had made it hundreds of times on hundreds of roads in 30 years of riding, in the small daily choices that build a person's character, not by proclamation, but by practice. And he would make it again. That was the thing about the choice to stop. It was not a single heroic act. It was a practice, a commitment renewed again and again in moments large and small, in conditions good and terrible on highways and in hospital corridors and in courtrooms and in community centers, on Saturday mornings when the parking lot is full of people who have decided that the same thing is true, that you stop, that you hear the person in the dark, that you move. Logan Whitaker sat in his chair along the wall of that community center in Montana with cuts healed on his hands and a daughter named in part for Grace, and a room full of people who had understood something important and were doing something with it. And he was in the quiet and complete way of a man who has been through enough of the world to know the difference at peace. Outside, the first real snow of spring had started late season soft, the kind that doesn't stick but covers everything briefly in white, before the sun comes back and finds the world beneath it unchanged and continuing. The Silver Ravens kept riding. The highway network kept growing. Claire Anderson kept building the place into something better than it had been. And Eleanor Grace Anderson, 6 weeks old and entirely unaware of the magnitude of what the world had done and what the world had tried to do in the days before she learned to see it, kept breathing with the steady, stubborn, luminous insistence of a person who has decided without anyone having to tell her that she is exactly where she is supposed to be. Some cries in the dark go unanswered, but not this one. Not this one.